Well, I hope you enjoyed going back in time with me. And what we've been watching is actual footage, and we're watching it as I speak, actual footage of the Chicago World's Fair back in 1934, 33, 34, when the Singer Featherweight 221 was first introduced. And you can just see what an event it was. People from around the world came together because it was a century of innovation. There were so many new things coming on the scene, so many new things being introduced that was changing the lives of everyone. And certainly the Featherweight 221 was in that class as well for those that loved sewing, those that enjoyed the art of sewing and making their own clothes and all the things that created that hum inside of the household. And you can see, because it was on the water, there were ships that came in. It was a major event. I mean, it was almost as big, almost as significant, almost as dramatic as this premiere as we are celebrating Louie and Sandra's incredible General Electric Model A. And I've been saying in the different things leading up to this, I've been referring to it as the General Electric So Handy Model A. That's not entirely correct. There were models that came out before this model that were part of the So Handy family, but technically General Electric stood alone in presenting, and I should break away from the Chicago World's Fair, as tempting as it is to stay there and to look at these events from the past. But we've got even a bigger celebration than the Chicago World's Fair back in 1933-34 with introducing this amazing predecessor, some would argue, to the Featherweight that was introduced at this incredible event in Chicago back in 1934. So, bye Chicago World's Fair. Goodbye. Bye-bye. 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 Let's move back into current times in celebrating Louie and Sandra's incredible machine that would have come out in about the same window as the Chicago World's Fair. Maybe a little bit before. Louie's machine, boy, that's a looker, isn't it? Woohoo! So, yeah, we could linger over there. We're not going to linger. All right, we'll linger a little bit more. All right, well, okay, we're done lingering. Look at it. He's like punching it. He's going, yeah, baby. Yeah, look at me go. 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 You know what? Innovation also means power, doesn't it? That guy's kicking it. He's probably only doing about maybe 60, 65 miles an hour. But you know what? That was a big deal back then. That was a big deal. I hope he doesn't crash. Maybe we should leave the scene before he crashes. What do you think? Holy mackerel! He almost rolled it, baby. Almost rolled it. Yeah. Here he comes to the finish. Whoa, again. Woo! Nice driving, man. Nice driving. I would have taken it a little bit faster, but hey, that's me. That's me. All right. We're going to pan away before something dramatic happens, like a crash or something like that. So, on the workbench, and I'm going to get some lights on. And I'll pause our little movie here of this very special event as we enjoy some more carnival-style, World's Fair-type music. Turn this down a little bit more so I can talk at the same time. All right, lights on, please. Lights on. So what we're looking at in this shot, as I continue to get more lights on, is we are looking at Louie and Sandra's General Electric Model A. But also on the same workbench right now, I've got a Centennial Singer Featherweight on the left, and then I've got a Singer 99K on the right. And the reason I brought these other two machines on the workbench to share the space with Louie and Sandra's incredible General Electric Model A is because these machines would have been coming on the scene about the same time, and they would have been also compared and contrasted to this Model A that belongs to Louie and Sandra. Because of the portability, because of the size, up until these times, all the machines had been pretty much relegated to being in a table. And all of a sudden there were manufacturers coming on the scene that said, no, 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 a machine can be in the home, but it can also leave the home. It can have portability. And that was true of the So Handy Model A, that was true of the Featherweight 221, that was certainly true as well of the 99K. All of these machines had that ability to sprout legs and to walk away from the household, which was a brand new concept back then. A brand new concept. The machine had always been a fixture in the home, and there was no thought of removing it. There was no thought of taking it anywhere else. Well, to the shock and awe of people back then, now it's almost a demand. It's almost a requirement that a machine have portability, especially with all of the activities that are brewing around sewing, like the quilting retreats, the quilting expos, and all the other things that get people out and about with their machines showing their stuff. And speaking of showing their stuff and out and about, you might notice, you may have noticed, you might have noticed that Dr. Singer, everyone knows him. He's about as famous as I am. Probably more famous, but shh. But we also have a new friend at the workshop there on the right. And he doesn't have a name. None of the people that arrive at the workshop have names. What is that about? But he's simply known as the Singer Repair Guy. He's retired now, but back in the day, he was one of those guys that would have been going door to door selling those Singer sewing machines. He would have been that guy that eventually opened up a shop and started repairing those machines that were being sold by Singer out in, out on the East Coast, out in Anderson, South Carolina, and other locations where they were just really rolling the machines out fast and furious. So he's a new addition to the workshop. The Singer Repair Guy is kind of what we're going to call him for now. And if anyone has a name that they would really strongly feel, okay, yeah, we can call him the Singer Repair Guy. That's kind of his nickname, kind of like the Garbage Man or the Mailman or whatever. But he should have a name. He should have a name! Then type it in the chat what you think his name should be. Type it in the chat right now if you have a really strong feeling. If the Singer Repair Guy is not good enough and he needs to have a name, what is it? What is his name? I know you have a suggestion, Dr. Singer, but I want our friends to chime in on this. You already told me your suggestion. I don't think Bubba fits him. I just don't think... He doesn't look like a Bubba to me. He doesn't. I'm sorry. But any rate, welcome, Singer Repair Guy. Very cool. So we're looking at all of these machines, but in the foreground, we're obviously looking at Louie and Sandra's General Electric Model A, which would have come out right around 1931. So it would have come on the scene in its infancy about 3 years before that Chicago World's Fair that we were watching at the beginning of this premiere. And so it came on the scene and kind of left the scene right around 1934, right as the World's Fair was at its boom. And interestingly as well, and you may not know this, and we'll kind of look at this in more detail through some of the great books that Louie sent with this machine from California. Louie's from California, by the way. Sandra's from California, too. They're Californians! And they bought a bunch of cool books that kind of go along with this General Electric Model A. And what you'll see as you kind of look into that is Singer, about the same time that they were going to debut that coveted Featherweight 221. Again, mine's the Centennial version on the back left corner over there. But as they were getting ready to introduce the 221 for the first time at the Chicago World's Fair, they were also in the works to take over production of this machine, this green one right in the foreground, this General Electric Model A. They were getting ready to take over that whole phase of sew handies that preceded this General Electric Model A, and all the models within that little colony, within that little family of teeny tiny machines, just like the Featherweight that they were getting ready to introduce at the Chicago World's Fair. Singer was a very smart operator. Their belief was, like some of the big, oligopolies, to use a 50-cent word, and some of the other big monopolies that were on the scene and beginning to develop their footprint, a very big footprint that happened to be crushing a lot of the smaller folks out there. And Singer, as they were getting ready to step out into the limelight at the Chicago World's Fair, and they were about to say, we've got this incredible 11-pound wonder. It's called the Featherweight 221. They were also operating behind the scenes to begin to, if not crush, control those that were trying to market a machine that could take any of the limelight away from them. It's almost a little bit diabolical, isn't it? They're leading up to this big Chicago World's Fair in 1934, and they're like, hey, here it is, the Featherweight. And at the same time, they're operating behind the scenes in an effort to try to squelch those that were already on the scene, starting to draw some interest and attention with their equivalent of what might have been referred to back then as a featherweight style machine. They weren't calling it a featherweight. They were calling it a sew handy. They were calling it the standard way back in the earlier phases of this. And then eventually they were calling it the General Electric Model A, like this machine right here on camera right now that belongs to my good friends out in California. So a little bit of a back history on the Singer Sewing Machine Company. How do they play into this whole scheme of things? Why are we looking at the Chicago World's Fair? How do they tie into the blah, 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 blah of all of this? Well, there you go. They were getting ready to buy out the company that was doing machines just like the one you're looking at right now that belongs to Louie and Sandra from California. Those naughty Singer guys. We can't have any competition. It's bad for competition to have competition. Now, I'm not sure if that makes any sense. It's bad to have competition, to have Then why do restaurants co-locate their restaurants with other ones? Yeah, it's a magnetic thing. When people are wanting a product, if you put a bunch of other products together with theirs, it draws more people in. And if you've done a good job of marketing your product and framing it and showing the features and benefits, then you're going to get more business with competition co-located with your product than you would if you get rid of all the other competition. So, yeah. So Singer they were smart. They wanted to control it. They didn't want to eliminate it because it had a slightly different offering than what their 221 was going to offer when it was debuted just a few months after they took over that company. Yeah. There you go. What do you think, Dr. Singer? Did I cover that pretty good? I slammed it? I've never heard you say slam before. All right, so let's zoom in, finally, after all the blah, 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 and take a closer look at this General Electric Model A. So, the first thing you're going to notice is it doesn't have some of the things you would expect to see on a traditional sewing machine. Where the heck is the balance wheel? And what's that little stubby thing all about right there? Well, that little stubby thing is where you slide the bobbin on when you're going to wind it. And there is no thread tensioner. As the book would show you, when you slide the bobbin on there, coming off of the spool pin on top, there's only one spool pin, so spool goes there, bobbin goes there, and then extending out to the front of the machine, if I come out on the shot, extending out to the front of the machine, you've got the equivalent of probably about 4 inches of thread with your pointer finger and your thumb and then you engage the machine, and you can't have the bobbin and the raceway, you can't have the machine threaded up or it'll gum up the works. You've got to wind that bobbin all unto itself and then get it loaded into that long beak shuttle system, which is also very unique to this model. So that's one of the nuances about this particular machine. The spotlight style light on the back that you can't quite see, you can just see the edge of it, was used on machines like this 99K. It was called a spotlight light assembly because it looks like a spotlight, that's why. So they never used the spotlight light assembly on the Featherweight. It was just that housed type assembly on the front. And if you've seen this other premieres, this is my rather tattered up Centennial Featherweight that eventually is going to get brand new paint, probably brand new decals as well, and then I'm going to offer it for sale. But it has a light assembly more like the 201-2. It's mounted on the front, it's prominent, very much like the machine that I showed you at the Oliver Mansion that initially I misidentified as a 1591 because both of them have potted motors, and in a room where the camera can see more than I can because it picks up that light better than my eyes do, I eventually discovered when I shined the light on it, oh no, that's a 201-2. So the 201-2, the Featherweight, are going to have similar light assemblies, very similar. But the spotlight assembly that's on Louie and Sandra's machine is going to be more characteristic of that 99K just off camera to the right there. The other thing you're going to notice is that the motor is kind of mounted on the rear of the machine, but it's kind of mounted and molded into the machine. And even after going through all of the great resources that Louie and Sandra sent me, there was nothing in any of the books, there was nothing on the motor telling you how big is that motor. But as you'll see in the progress shots, as I dug into that motor and I examined that motor very carefully, I would put it in a class of, drum roll, somewhere between a 0.6 to a 0.8 amp motor as far as that motor output. So it's going to have significantly more power than the Singer Featherweight. It's going to have more power even than the Singer 99K. Both, the 99K is going to be about 0.54 amps. The Featherweight, as you well know by now, being a great student, is going to have 0.4 amps. So the General Electric Model A is going to have more power output, plus it's going to have a commutator type motor, so it's going to have even more punch to it. And we'll get into the motor types a little bit more later. There's an induction type motor, there's a commutator type motor, there's motors with magnets, there's motors with no magnets, there's motors that are tied to the Tesla company, there are motors that are not tied to the Tesla company, blah, 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 blah. We could go on forever. So the short and long of it is, as I looked at this motor, I tested output, I listened to it at full power after I got done restoring the motor as well. And it needed a lot of attention, let's just say that. I was convinced by working with thousands of machines over the years that this is going to be right around 0.6 to 0.8. So it's going to be somewhere in between, say, a 201-2 and a Spartan. Remember, the mighty Spartan is a spin-off of the 99, like this machine right here. Where is it? The Spartan is going to be the poor man's version, the simple man's version of the 99K. But the Spartan is going to come with a 0.8 amp motor. Remember that. The Spartan has a bigger motor. It doesn't have all the doodads on it. It doesn't have the decorative filigree decals, but it's got a motor that'll knock your socks off. So somewhere between the 201-2 being that 0.6 peak type motor and the Spartan with a 0.8 amp motor is where Louie and Sandra's Model A is going to be falling. So this machine, again, that came out between 1931 and 34 is not going to have a balance wheel like we're accustomed to seeing up here on the right side of the pillar. But it's going to have the equivalent right down here. And in this instance, the balance wheel is mounted to the base of the machine on the right side there. And it's going to be going directly to that pulley that comes off of the motor. So you've got a real nice feed with that motor pulley, kind of like the Husqvarnas are set up, where that motor pulley goes right into that drive system, and then it powers that machine. Now, the one thing you'll notice if you look real close at that pulley that comes off of the motor, we've got something blue around that pulley. What is that blue thing? Is that part of the original design? Is that part of the original model? A? Almost feel Australian. But no, it's not. What I decided to do for Louie and Sandra is I decided to put a brand new belt. And there are only a few sources out there that advertise that they offer belts that fit this particular General Electric Model A. And they're supposed to also fit a number of the earlier versions of this that were specifically So Handy models. But the problem whenever you buy something that is re-engineered or has been made in contemporary times for vintage type machines like this from the 1930s is they can just be a few thousandths of an inch off, and all of a sudden you got problems. You got problems! Just like this belt. This belt is just about 2/1000ths of an inch too big for Louie and Sandra's machine. 2/1000ths of an inch. That's teeny tiny. But when you're talking about the spin up on that pulley coming off of the motor, the output shaft on that motor spinning up to super high RPMs, it's just enough to cause that belt to slip. It causes the belt to slip. I was so disappointed. I got all my other work done. The belt arrived. I'm like, yeah, let's test this puppy out. I slide the belt over the equivalent of that balance wheel in the foreground and then over that motor pulley. And I hit that gas pedal. You know, just like you saw that car back at the Chicago World's Fair. He's bahan. He's going, yeah, baby, let's put the pedal to the metal. And all I get is zzz. It's slipping like a person on roller skates that doesn't know what they're doing. Yeah, all over the place. And I'm thinking, back to what, you know, lots of people ask me, how did you get involved with this, Scott? How did you get involved with vintage sewing machines? And I'll talk about being raised by a dad that was a master mechanic, and that I would spend hours upon hours upon hours upon hours upon in a freezing garage in the thick of winter with Dad, because I wanted to be with Dad and watch him work on our cars. And I learned how to work on cars with Dad. And, whoops, I did it again. And so I thought back to those times with Dad in that freezing garage. Eventually we got a furnace out in the garage, by the way. That was, wow, life changer. So, but I thought about my times with Dad, and I thought about the lessons that he taught me. And I thought about all those hours that we spent together where we were troubleshooting things. And I'll just do a quick digression to share something funny with you. I remember one time we're out in the garage, and it's not winter, so I'm actually out there and I'm not shivering as we're bleeding brakes and adjusting carburetors, doing all the other things that we did together as father and son. It was the summer, which in Wisconsin, where I grew up as a boy, summers get pretty hot too, so it was nice, it was comfortable. We were installing a brand new intermittent windshield wiper system on one of our vehicles. And I had been with Dad through every step of the way, wiring it, setting it up, installing it. And we got to the phase of trying to test it. And we turned on the switch to activate it. As a matter of fact, if I remember right, Dad let me turn the switch on. That's big stuff when you're about 9 years old. Dad trusts me to turn the switch? Are you kidding me? Whoa! And so he says, okay, Scott, go ahead and turn the switch. So I turn the switch. Nothing happens. And my mind is racing. Did I do something wrong? Did I turn the switch the wrong way? But there's only one way to turn the switch, so I don't think I messed anything up. And Dad starts to laugh as he sees the nervousness on my face. And when my dad would laugh, oh my gosh, talk about a precious memory, a precious gift. When Dad would laugh, when it was the equivalent of a belly laugh, he would arch his head back and his top teeth would pop out, would protrude, and he would just be vibrating. And that's what he started to do. And I said, Dad, why are you laughing? It's not working. He goes, we forgot the most important thing, the most practical thing that we don't have right now, Scott. What do you think it is? What are these things designed to do? He was teaching me a lesson. He already knew that it wasn't going to work. He already knew. I said, well, Dad, they're windshield wipers. It's not raining today. He goes, exactly. So he grabs a spray bottle, I think it was, and he squirts water all over the windshield. And he goes, now, try it again. And I turned that little switch again, and all of a sudden the wipers started moving. And they started squeaking, so he sprayed more water. And he sprayed more water. And he sprayed more water. And they moved beautifully. And the windshield was clean. And all of a sudden we had something that was working. And all it was missing was what it was designed to do. It was missing water. And so at any rate, as we're staring at these two right now, the equivalent of this balance wheel for this Model A and this output pulley shaft that comes off of the motor, I thought, okay, it's not going to fit. It's not going to work. I can't do anything. I'm stuck. And then Dad's voice whispered, he says, what do you really need? What would fix this? And I said, well, if it were a little bit tighter on the pulley. He said, try a rubber band. And I said, as if he was right in the room with me, I said, yeah, that's genius. Rubber against the metal pulley, that should work. It does. It works beautifully. And I'm going to, before the machine is shipped back to Louie, I'm going to make a more permanent fix to it, probably. I'll probably use a silicone type rubber material to build up the inside of that pulley area that belt will run over just a little bit higher up so that it fills the space that rubber band is filling right now. But isn't it neat as you're sitting sometimes alone, you'll all of a sudden, if your parents are no longer alive, your mom has passed away, your dad has passed away, and all of a sudden you'll hear their voice as you're facing a challenge. You'll hear them whisper the solution to you. Or they'll remind you of something that you saw together back in your childhood, and all of a sudden, well, I might as well just do it. All of a sudden the light goes on, or, where is it? Where is it? It's somewhere there. All of a sudden the bell goes off, and you're no longer facing a challenge. All of a sudden you've got a working solution. So the long and short of it is, there's a brand new belt on this machine, but it's a re-engineered belt because the original ones obviously are not made anymore. And if you happen to buy a belt like this and you've got a Model A like this, or you have one of the original So Handies, you can use a rubber band just like I did. You just wrap it around there nice and snug, slide that belt over the top of it, and you're back in business. Okay? I'll show you something else real quick before I forget to mention it over here in this area. You might be saying, because you're extremely smart, you might be saying, okay, what kind of needle? Are there needles out there for this Model A that belongs to Louie and Sandra from the great state of California? The answer is, they're almost impossible to find on the internet. They are nearly impossible to find on the internet when you're looking for needles and you're searching specifically for General Electric. Even if you put in So Handy, General Electric So Handy Model A, but if you put in General Electric Model A, because again, this is a standalone machine, it's not part of the So Handy family technically. It's a standalone machine that General Electric put out, but it was kind of clustered in that whole family of So Handy machines. Even on the manuals, when you look at the manuals that Louie provided for me, it's going to include that word So Handy. But as I was searching, because I wanted to get some fresh needles, the needle in there just looked like it was kind of, I don't know. That needle has been around since 1930. Matter of fact, this is the original needle right here. I'll just kind of drop it in the middle. That's the original needle right there, and you can kind of see the varnishing on it and that. It just doesn't have a look of, I'm ready to get the job done. See that? And it's not just on the top of the needle, it's like extending all the way down the shaft, all the way down to the scarf, all the way down to the point of the needle. It's all junked up. And so I was thinking, doggone it, that's not gonna work. So I went into my mode of, okay, if I can't find something readily on the internet, because I want to move forward with this project, then I've got to innovate something. Remember that other machine a number of months ago that I introduced to you, and I couldn't find a needle for it? And if you remember what that machine is, type it in the chat. But I couldn't find a needle, so I ended up grinding a needle and making it fit for that machine. Well, in this instance, thankfully, I didn't have to grind a needle. The first thing I wanted to look at on the right there is the Singer Needle 15-1. It's such a standard common needle for most machines, not just Singer machines, but so many machines use the 15-1. So I thought maybe, just maybe, the Singer 15-1 will work on Louie and Sandra's machine. No. The length of the needle is okay. Even the eye of the needle is okay. But it has a different scarf and it has a different groove, a long groove going up that needle. So the Singer 15-1 is a no-go for this type of Model A. So then I started digging through all of my needles, and I got a lot of needles, folks. And I thought, the organ needle folks are about as smart as the day goes long. They're super smart folks. They really are. Maybe this style 15-1, because not all 15-1s are the same. Let me say it again. If you ever get a machine and it says use a 15-1, there's a lot of different 15-1s, folks. Again, as you look at the design of a needle, the 15-1s will have different needle eye alignments. They'll have different lengths of points. The shafts will be different. The shank will be different as far as the overall length and how far it's going to feed up into that needle bar. You're going to notice also that some of them will have longer grooves on the needle side of the flat side. Others will have shorter grooves. Others, you'll have a more defined scarf, which is right at the bottom of the needle, just above in the eye proximity. Others will have no scarf at all. And so you've got to really be wise when it comes to needles. The science of needles just continues to be like, whoa, I'm still a student. If you ever want to feel like you don't know everything, sit down to needles and start to look at needles in depth. And many, many, many months ago, I shared a link telling you about all the different types of needles on Facebook. And if you're not a Facebooker, another thing you missed. But I will give you some information on that if I can get it during the premiere, and then you can look it up yourself. But needles are a science unto themselves. So these organ needles are a 15-1, just like the Singer ones just off screen. But these are going to be a slightly different design. Let me kind of grab it and I'll see if I can open it up so that you can see specifically. Actually, I can just flip it over. That's easier. That's much easier. So these are a 15-1, but I'm going to show you here. Let me put it up here so that it's standing more on an angle and we're able to look at it more easily. So these are, they don't work. But these do work beautifully on Louie and Sandra's machine. So any of you out there that have been struggling with needles, and there are some folks out there, I'll just call them the charlatan of needles. They're the charlatans of needles. And they'll be offering something like this. They'll repackage it and they'll say this is specifically designed for the Model A General Electric. And that's why we're asking you like $3 a needle. Don't get sucked into it. Don't buy it. They're trying to trick you. Like the peddlers at the World's Fair were probably trying to sell people everything. Some of it was real, some of it was fake. So, these needles put out, again, by the Organ Needle Company. Great company. They offer this needle. It's called the HA times 1 130-705H 15-1 blah 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 blah. And these particular ones are a size 11. These work beautifully in the General Electric Model A. And I can only suspect, because the hook system and everything is going to be nearly identical on the earlier versions of the So Handys, like this Model A, that these will also work on those So Handy versions as well. And you can buy these on Etsy, you can buy them on eBay, you can buy them probably practically anywhere. And you can see now they're made in Japan. And any rate, I'll leave it on here for just a second so you can look at it. And I will recommend to Louie and Sandra as well. I've got a fresh one of these needles in the machine, but in this little packet I only had 2 needles. And I'm going to hang on to the other needle, selfishly. And I'll send back your original needle with it. But you'll want to order needles like these for this Model A. They work perfectly. They work beautifully. So this is the back. You've seen that long enough. And this is what the front should look like. Oregon needles. What does that say on the bottom there? Oregon Needle Company, Limited. So she's not only sewing, but she also can play the organ. Why wouldn't people buy these needles? I mean, they're not a Schmetz needle. Nothing is. But they're really good. Plus you get a lady in a real pretty dress that plays the organ. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So there you go. That was my needle dilemma. That was my belt dilemma. That was my rubber band dilemma that has led us finally to this premiere. Finally! And we are intentionally not even ready to do the premiere yet, technically. We're not even ready yet because I wanted to show you how to thread this Model A. Why am I going to do that? Is it really that tough? Is it really that tricky? Probably not. It's probably not that tricky. But I noticed even in the book that Louie and Sandra sent with the machine, this book right here, it says instructions for using the portable sewing machine. General Electric. It's put out by General Electric. Even in this book that Louie and Sandra sent for me as a resource to get their machine back to life again. And by the way, let me rewind for just a second here, please. Let me rewind, and for those of you that have been out of touch with this story for a while, and it has been a while, let me remind you that Louie and Sandra desperately, for a period of almost 10 years, were trying to find somebody out in the great state of California that would be willing to take this machine on as a restorative project. And I think they checked outside of California as well. And everybody was gun shy of it. Maybe because they couldn't find any needles. I don't know. But the point is that for almost a decade, they were working on again, off again, and trying to find somebody that would take this machine on. Finally came across my videos, I think, on YouTube, and started watching them and said, this guy might know something about sewing machines. Maybe a little bit. And so that's when Louie and I started to get into a dialogue, and eventually the machine was shipped from California all the way here to Oconto, Wisconsin. And along with it was this owner's manual, instruction manual, and also some of these other manuals as well that are more So Handy specific. Let me move my phone. I got some stuff on the phone I want to show you as well. So along with it, Louie and Sandra also sent me this one. It's called Before the Featherweight, So Handy Volume 2, Maintenance and Repair by Philip Kaiser. I kind of cut Philip's last name off there. Sorry about that, Philip. There we go. And along with this manual, which is a really kind of a cool manual, and I've marked some things in it, as you can see, that I want to share with you. They also sent this manual as well, which is Before the Featherweight, So Handy Volume 1, History, also by Mr. Kaiser as well. And apparently there's also a Volume 2. I don't know if maybe Sandra and Louie have that at home, or if they're looking at getting it or whatever. But let me just say that these manuals cover a lot more turf than I'll be able to cover during this premiere. But I do want to share some little bits of it in here that are in these manuals, because they made the effort to send them along with the machine, and they really do cover some good stuff. Some good stuff about the machine, along with the fact, and you might remember this from many, many months ago, we were talking about motors, we were talking about foot controllers, and the issue of asbestos potentially being in them. You remember that? We talked about that. I talked about the expense and invited folks if they wanted to donate. I think I got a $5 donation, and it's a couple $100 to, you know, get the entire process done. So I haven't stepped towards that yet. So if anybody wants to make a donation so I can do a follow-up premiere, you know, detailing motors, foot controllers, etc., and talking about the asbestos, and then sending off samples, getting the results back, blah, blah, blah. At the bottom of this premiere, at the very bottom, you'll see there's a place to click on the left that gives you a choice of emojis that you can kind of put into the chat. To the right of it is where you can actually make a donation during this live premiere. And it'll pop up with your screen name saying, you know, the amount that you donated. I'm not pushing you towards that, but if you decide you want to support that cause of looking at asbestos in vintage sewing machines, and me being able to send those samples out to, I think it was New Jersey, then by all means consider making a donation. It doesn't have to be a big donation, but my total cost to do it's going to be probably about $150, and I've gotten a $5 donation so far, so you can do the math there on what I still need to be able to try to collect to at least defray some of the cost. So, but in these manuals that Louie and Sandra sent, the author of this, Mr. Kaiser, who has really done a lot of homework on these series of Sew Handy machines, the ones by General Electric, the ones by Standard, etc., and goes into the fact that the pads that are underneath the motor, and again, I took this whole thing apart, took the motor assembly apart as well. On the bottom of this motor assembly, there are cushion pads that serve as a heat retardant for the wood base on this machine, and also will also create a little bit of a cushion for that motor as it's running so that it doesn't vibrate. Those are clearly made out of asbestos on this particular machine. And I did spray a sealer on them to try to basically cocoon that asbestos in this motor housing, so if anyone else in the future works on this machine, they're not going to be potentially exposed to it, but it's still in there. It's still part of that motor assembly mount. So just be aware that if you have a Sew Handy machine that was made by Standard Sewing Machine Company, or you have this Model A that was made by General Electric, just be aware that without a shadow of a doubt, without having to collect samples, without having to send them out to a lab in New Jersey, I can tell you that decidedly the Standard Sewing Machine Company and General Electric as well used these cushion pads in conjunction with the motor to retard heat and also to act as a cushion for that motor to eliminate vibration. So be aware of that. Big warning sign. Warning, 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 warning. These Sew Handys made by Standard and also the Model A made by General Electric do have asbestos in that motor assembly area, okay? And I have to make a confession to all of you. I always say, sometimes a teacher, always a student. Well, when I first launched into this machine and began to restore it and got into that motor area and everything, I discovered after the fact that those pads were asbestos. So I was exposed to them. Thankfully, I didn't use canned air or my compressor. I didn't use my compressed type air to blow into that motor assembly until after I started to dig into some of these books that Louie and Sandra sent me. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, whoa, red light, brakes on. Do not blow that motor assembly out with my air compressor or with compressed canned air, because it will take that asbestos airborne. So that was a good thing where I'd begun to service the motor. I'd gotten into the commutator area. I was cleaning the commutator. I was cleaning the stator. I was completing the stacked, blah, blah, blah. What is it? I remember. I was beginning to clean the, yeah. I was beginning to clean the stacked metal lamentations and the armature and all the other parts of the motor assembly. And then I was going to begin to move into the phase of maybe using some sort of a compression process to blow through the areas that I couldn't reach to get the dust and the dirt out of there. Because some of the areas you weren't able to disassemble it completely. Thankfully, I read those books before I did that. So if you own a machine like this, or you own one of the So Handy machines put out by Standard, do not blow out those motors with a compressor type apparatus, or even compressed air out of a can, because you will potentially send that asbestos airborne. Blah. Makes sense? I better get a drink of water. So, just be aware of that. It's a great machine, but it does have asbestos in it. And as a service to my customers, I've done my best to try to seal that asbestos, basically cause it to stick together with a binder so that it's not going to be as likely to go airborne. Okay? All right. I don't even remember what else we were talking about. So, oh yeah, we're going to talk about threading and stuff and all that good stuff. So again, it's interesting to me that instruction manuals, one of the most basic things you would expect to find in an instruction manual would be, how do you thread the machine? When you go through this instruction manual that Louie and Sandra got, it doesn't really show you, and it doesn't go step by step. It has one diagram, but the diagram is so chalky, it's like, okay, is that over and under? Is that under and over? Is that left to right? Is that right? So, I'm going to do my best to show you during this premiere, as we get this machine set up to sew, how you thread this puppy. And also, we're also going to come off the tripod, and I'm going to show you how to open up that shuttle area to get at that long beak shuttle. And I am saying beak, B-E-A-K. Long beak shuttle system was a very early version following the vibrating shuttle, leading up to the rotary, the oscillating hook, and all that other good stuff. And so it's one of those things, a lot of people don't hear about them. They don't talk about them because they weren't as common. They aren't as common. But we're going to take a look at one today. All right. So let's focus first of all on that long beak shuttle. I'm going to come off the tripod. I'll lock that in place. And we'll kind of look down into that well to see what we see. Yeah. Let's see what we see. So if you open up this slide plate, and the first thing you see is this, that's a little bit daunting. It's like, whoa, what is that all about? What is that thing? What is that creature from outer space? Right? But it's really not as bad. It's not as complicated as you might think. And as I try to do this, remember, I'm holding the camera with one hand, and then I'm also trying to do different things down here in this very limited space. So if it's a little bit out of whack, if it goes out of focus, live with it. Live with it! So right on the, let me see, and I'm getting some reflection off of this light as well. Okay, so right over here on the left side, I'm going to do my best to point at it. Right over here on the left side, you can see that this is a piece that can be depressed. See that little space right there? That means that it's gonna rock in, and we're going to be able to press that in to open up this long beak shuttle system. So I will do that best. I will do my best to show you that. I'm going to push right on here where my finger is, and all of a sudden it opens up, and we can kind of look inside, and there is our bobbin case and our bobbin. And now we have to figure out with my big fingers how the heck you get that thing out of there. So you that have small fingers can kind of reach in and kind of grab it. But for me and for other folks that have bigger hands, what I use is I use a magnet. Once I actually focus on what we're looking at here, I use a magnet and kind of slide it into there and grab it and pull it out. I'm just going to slide this little plate closed again. Set this down there. And now what I'm going to try to use is the tripod so I can do a couple of things and have my hands free to do it. Where should I focus it? Maybe I'll focus it right there. That way it can be right in the forefront of the machine. Okay, got my screen turned around. So the first thing I want to show you is, move my light in as well, and turn it on. That might be helpful. So this is a long beak shuttle system. And the reason it's called a long beak is if I turn it around like this, you can see that this area right up here kind of protrudes up. It kind of sticks up almost like a beak. And that's kind of where it gets its name from, being a long beak shuttle system instead of just a standard, like a bobbin case. And also the threading of it's a little bit different as well. And the orientation of the thread on this long beak shuttle system could not be any more critical. If you end up putting the bobbin in the wrong way so that it's unwinding counterclockwise rather than clockwise, it is going to create a world of headache for you. So that's the first thing to emphasize when you put the bobbin into the case. And this is the back side of the bobbin right here. So we got to be able to pop this out so I can show you how to thread this long beak shuttle. And and then we'll go through the process of threading the machine, get it all set up, and we'll finally jump into the sew-offs and that. But I think this is important too as well, because when I was looking on the internet, I really didn't see a lot of information about the long beak shuttles and how they're threaded, how the thread is orientated, especially on this Model A. And so I think this is definitely worth covering. If you agree, type in the chat a thumbs up or something like that, just so that I know that that you agree that we're doing something worthwhile, if you don't mind. Let me just shut this down. Set that down for a second. Maybe I need to drink more water. And I'm going to grab something so we can gently push that bobbin out. And I'll let you know, you can't tell necessarily as you're seeing me do this, but it takes a fair amount of force. That bobbin locks over the stem of that long beak shuttle system very snugly. And so it's not super easy to get it out. And you also have to do it in such a way that you're not going to end up potentially scarring that bobbin either. Does that make sense? So I'm going to use a flat end screwdriver and just gently apply pressure this direction to try to get that bobbin to pop out. And then we'll take a look at the two as separate units, if you will. So you can see there I've begun to just apply a little bit of pressure to get that bobbin to separate from the long beak shuttle system. I'm going to pull it out now. Separate the two. So now I've got the long beak shuttle system right here without the bobbin in it. There's the other side of it right there. And I should show you by zooming in a little bit closer. We've talked before about adjusting tension on machines, and we generally always try to focus on the upper tension control because it's just easier, it's more accessible, it's more convenient, and generally it's adequate to be able to make the necessary adjustments that we need. But with this particular one, after I disassembled the upper tension, I put everything back together, and I was trying to get a nice balance on that stitch. No matter how much I adjusted that upper tension, I was just not getting enough of an effect to define that lock stitch. And so I had to go into this system here and make adjustments on that. Someone had turned the screw so far down that long beak shuttle system was just, I mean, it was dominating that upper tension. That upper tension, no matter how far I turned it in, it was just like, I'm trying the best I can, and it's not enough. It's not enough. So I finally had to go in there, and I'll zoom in on this so you can see it more readily. Actually, you can see it pretty doggone good. Lock this in place. Oh, I should also plug my camera back in too. Okay, so we're looking at, again on the left, we're looking at that very unique bobbin. And again, if you decide to buy aftermarket bobbins for the So Handy family / General Electric Model A, just be aware, like that belt that I talked about, that was a couple thousandths of an inch off, and as a result, was not gripping that pulley and was spinning. And I should mention something. You know what? I forgot to mention something else. Let me go away from that just for a second. On a lot of motor type mounts, you're able to make adjustments to that mount. Sometimes it's by loosening a couple of screws and sliding that bracket up or down. On this particular Model A, the motor output shaft and pulley on the rear of the machine there, and then the equivalent of the balance wheel to the front, they have no adjustments on them. So if that belt doesn't fit perfectly, you don't have the ability to, say, slide that balance wheel to the front or slide that pulley on the rear that comes off of the motor, say, to the rear to make that belt more snug. There's no option to do that on this model. There simply isn't. So that's where you have to look at adding a rubber band or building up that inner part of that motor pulley that the belt rides over, so it tightens that belt a little bit more so that you don't have any slippage. I forgot to mention that there's no adjustment on there, and that was part of the reason I couldn't just adjust it like you might on some machines. Okay, so back to this. So we've got the long beak shuttle system on the right, we've got the bobbin on the left, and then we've got these two screws right here. We've got this screw on the right that is a mounting screw. It should be completely snug, but you want to use a screwdriver that's appropriately sized so that you don't end up stripping or cracking that screw off. Again, you're talking about a machine that is from the early 1930s, and metal also degrades over time and becomes more brittle. So don't try to use the wrong screwdriver if you're going to try to say, okay, I want to check that mounting screw that Scott talked about, or I've tried to make my adjustments up top and the upper tension just isn't able to generate enough pull up to define that lock stitch, so that long beak shuttle system must be cranked up too high. So this is your mounting screw. That has to be totally tight. This is your adjusting screw on the left. And again, the simple rule with an adjusting screw on this long beak shuttle system or any bobbin case type assembly is if you turn it to the right, which is clockwise, you're going to be increasing the pull of that long beak shuttle system, which means it's going to be yanking that thread down with greater force to define that top stitch, which is going to be fighting against that upper tension that's trying to pull up to define that lock stitch. And I've talked about this a lot, but if you're new to the channel, this may be the first time you're hearing this. So I really want to emphasize that. The bobbin case, or this long beak shuttle, as you're looking at it right here, is going to be defining that top stitch. So if you do a sew off on a machine like this and that lock stitch is not defined, and you go, I've watched a lot of Scott's videos, he talks about the tug of war. He talks about that upper tension pulling up to define that lock stitch. He talks about that bobbin case down below pulling down to define that top stitch. I'm not getting a nicely defined lock stitch, so I'm going to crank up my upper tension. And you crank it, and you crank it, and you crank it, and still you're seeing some subtle improvement, but still you're not getting a nicely defined lock stitch. and that top stitch is still looking over poppy because that long beak shuttle system is flexing its muscles and pulling down and saying, yeah! Well, then you have to take away some of the muscle from that long beak shuttle assembly. And that's done by this screw on the left by turning it counterclockwise to the left. And whenever you make adjustments on a system like this down below, whether it's a long beak shuttle like this or whether it's a standard bobbin case, you always want to take it in tiny little increments. We're talking about probably, if we're talking millimeters, like a millimeter or so at a time, and then you have to put it back in, and it's very time consuming. I get that. You make an adjustment, it's pulling too hard down, you turn it a little bit to the left, say about a millimeter or so, you put it all back together, you put your material underneath the presser foot, you do a sew off. There's some improvement, but you're still not there yet. You have to take it all out all over again, and you have to make an adjustment a little bit further, counterclockwise, turning it to the left. Finally, you hit that sweet spot, and you do that sew off, and then all of a sudden you've got a nicely defined lock stitch, you've got a nicely defined top stitch, and they're balanced just perfectly. And that's what I finally was able to do here in this sew off with 2 layers of genuine cowhide. I've got my screen the wrong way. Blah. I was finally able to do this after I went through all those stages and steps with Louie and Sandra's machine off camera. And again, I did it with 1 layer first of all, with genuine cowhide, about 3 to 4 ounces. And I was getting a nicely defined top stitch, which was telling me that long beak shuttle was doing a fabulous job. But initially I was getting just a horrible lock stitch like these. See those? They're like almost, you can't even see anything. Where's the stitch? And so I finally was able to resolve that on a cotton polyester blend. And then I stepped it up to this leather, still a great looking top stitch. And then after I made all the adjustments with this long beak shuttle, taking the power away from that long beak shuttle system and giving some of that authority back to that upper tension, I was able to still get a top stitch like this, and then eventually get a lock stitch like this, that if I kind of pull it back, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. It's just absolutely spot on. And again, that's not a light sew off. That's through 2 layers of genuine cowhide, about 8 to 10 ounces of leather. Yes, 8 to 10 ounces of leather on this General Electric little teeny tiny machine, Model A. So again, don't believe what you read on the internet. I just made a post on Facebook talking about all the misinformation that's being circulated out there about machines, whether it's the type of oils you should use on them for lubrication, whether it's the type of service you should do the machine, the frequency, even if you don't do Facebook, you got to go there and check those out, because you just go, holy cow, one person is saying this, another supposed expert is saying this, and according to Scott, 80% of the information here is all incorrect. So all I can say is, stay in the classroom here on YouTube. Get involved with Facebook and look at some of the stuff I'm posting there as well. And then you can see what the real stuff is all about. But again, this is a long road leading up to this point right here, where I was able to sew with absolute ease 8 to 10 ounces of genuine cowhide on this little Model A, and also get a beautifully balanced lock stitch as well. But it only came after probably about, I'm pretty good when it comes to intuition about balancing stitch tension and that. So I think it took me 4 or 5 steps, but it still took me 4 or 5 steps. So maybe it'll take you a few more steps, because you don't have 22 plus years of experience working with these machines, and you haven't touched thousands of machines on the workbench. So if it takes you 10 steps, who cares? Once you get that sweet balance, you're going to have it pretty much locked in for any sewing that you're going to be doing with that machine, whether it's a Model A like this by General Electric, or whether it's one of the other machines similar to this in that Sew Handy family. So again, if you're looking at adjusting it, you're trying to get that lock stitch more defined, everything you're doing with the upper tension isn't cutting it, then make slow little incremental changes to that screw on the left to reduce the pull of this long beak shuttle. Make sure that screw on the right is nice and tight, because that's going to be your mounting screw for this band that controls that stitch balance as far as what that long beak shuttle is doing. And then get it done. Get it done. And be patient with yourself as you go through all those phases. And what I'm going to do while I have it out is I'm just going to swab the inside of this area where that bobbin is going to be riding. The inside, the shaft that bobbin is going to slide over, the inside of the shaft as well. And remember, I've cleaned this multiple times already, and yet you can see with the sewing I did off camera, see that? The sewing I've done off camera has already created some buildup in here, even as clean as I got this. So just be aware that one of the issues, I won't say a problem, one of the issues with the long beak shuttle design is that it does tend to build up a little bit quicker than some of the other bobbin assemblies. So you will have to do a little bit more maintenance on this to keep the machine running well. All right. So I'm going to go to this, even though this owner's manual doesn't do a spectacular job of showing the threading of this machine, which we're eventually going to do, it does do a decent job of showing you how that bobbin needs to be put into that bobbin case. At least I think it does. Maybe I got it from one of the other books. Maybe I did. Yeah, I probably did. Yeah, it's not in here. This owner's manual is really it misses quite a bit. It truly does. All right. Well, as I said, when we put the bobbin case in, we want to make sure that it's unwinding clockwise. So we're just going to go ahead and do it rather than, I wanted to show you where it is in this manual, but it must not be in this manual. It must be in one of the other manuals. But what is in this manual is this very interesting bobbin winding system on this machine. And you can see here, you hold the thread, as I described to you earlier, with your forefinger and your thumb. The bobbin goes on that little stem on the right side off of the pillar, and then you have the thread coming off the top, and then you basically hold onto that thread as you're winding the bobbin. So you don't want to go pedal to the metal. You might get a rope burn from the thread or something, but that's how you wind a bobbin on this machine. And again, you don't want to have the machine threaded up when you do this, because there is no clutch on this machine to disengage the drive of that main shaft to the needle. So the needle is going to be moving as you're winding that bobbin, no matter what you do. It's going to be moving. So don't have the machine threaded. Don't have anything in the raceway area where the long beak shuttle system would go. And then wind your bobbin, kind of guide it a little bit so you're getting that thread evenly. And the book does recommend that you don't overwind the bobbin either. So, and I only have the one bobbin set up, so hopefully we have enough thread on it. All right, so at last, we're going to go ahead and slide this bobbin back in now that we kind of looked at things a little bit. I'm going to wind it up a little bit. It's really cold here today. My hands are like going, oh man, it's freezing down in this workshop. So to get it orientated correctly, again, you want to make sure that this bobbin is unwinding clockwise, which means you want to have the thread over the top like this. You want to have the thread over the top when you insert it into the long beak shuttle. So I'm going to start to slide it into position a little bit. And again, it's going to slide over that stem with quite a bit of force because it's really designed to hold it in there well. So kind of just keep it like this. Make sure that thread is orientated correctly. Again, you want it to be unwinding clockwise, which is like this. So I'm going to snap it back into place. And then I need to feed the thread into this little notch right there. Can you see that little notch in the shot? I think you can. And then from there, I'm going to be drawing it across. And I've got to draw it then across and behind this little thread band right here. This is our control that we would be tightening or loosening to increase or decrease that long beak shuttle pull. This little band right here, I'll kind of point at it with a screwdriver. So as we turn that screw in clockwise, it's going to cause that band to press down harder to increase the pull down to define that top stitch. As we turn it counterclockwise, that little screw, it's going to reduce the pressure down on that band and define that top stitch less, which gives more power back to that upper tension to define the lock stitch. I hope that makes sense. So we came through that little slat. Now we're going to kind of drop behind this band. I don't know if you saw me, I kind of went over the top. I came behind that band, kind of pulled it down a little bit. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take that thread across the back of this long beak shuttle, and there's a tiny little hole right there at the top of this long beak pillar piece right here, if you will. You've got to push the thread through that hole and then kind of bring it over the crown of the long beak shuttle in order to thread this properly. Okay, so let me set this down real quick. I'm going to get a quick drink of water and we'll finish off setting up this long beak, and then we'll get it back into the assembly, and then we'll focus on the threading of the machine. We'll focus on the threading of the machine right after that. I got to get a little drink of water first. And I could put on a little bit of carnival music just in the background as we're doing this, since we're going to be doing this for a bit longer. Oops, I clicked the wrong one. All that talking, you need to wet your whistle a little bit, you know what I mean? You got to wet your whistle. You got to whistle well. Any of you real big water drinkers? If you're a huge water drinker, I mean, if you're like one of those people who walks around with those huge jugs or whatever, and you're like guzzling water all day long, we are on opposite poles. I have to remind myself to drink water. I'm not a regular water drinker. And that's probably not good, but it is what it is. But if you're a big water drinker, type it in the chat. I'd just be curious if any of you are like super hardcore water drinkers. Okay, so let's see what we're going to do next here. Because my hands are having trouble because it's cold down here today. You might remember that Czech Republic machine from many months ago. Okay, so I'm just going to show you like that. See how we kind of threaded it? Yeah, you can see that. We kind of threaded it up through. There's a little hole right here on this left side part of the long beak shuttle extension, and we're threading it through that hole, coming across the top of the long beak shuttle, like so. Okay, so you can see right now we came in from the side. Again, our bobbin, when it's unwinding, is going to be unwinding clockwise. We came through this little slat right there, that tiny little slat. We brought it across. We brought it behind basically the band, the metal band right there that's going to press down on that thread to decide how much pressure is going to be applied based on how far that screw has been turned in or turned back. And that's going to define our lock stitch, or excuse me, define our top stitch, blah, blah, blah. So that's going to define our top stitch. And then we came through that little hole right on the side of this piece right here, and we came across the top of the long beak shuttle. And we just kind of draw that thread across the top now, because when we put it back in, we're going to be inserting it like this. We're going to be inserting it like this, okay? So that's going to be our next step, and that may be a little bit hard for me to show you on camera. I'll do my best. I'll do my best. Maybe if I totally move the tripod, I'll be able to show you better, but it's really a tight space. So when we put it in, let me widen this shot. We put it in, we're going to be putting it in with the bobbin portion that would be on the back of the long beak shuttle. We're going to be putting that in first, and then we've got to close that little door. And there's no way I can do this with, let's see here. There's no way I can do this holding the camera at the same time, so we may just have to be innovative here, which we do quite a bit of, don't we? All right, let's see if that works in any way possible. Oh yeah, that works beautifully. Well done, Scott, well done. Scott gets an A in the class today. So you can see our long beak shuttle door is open right now, right? Come out on this a little bit. And hopefully my hands are going to partially block this until I get it seated in there. So you'll just have to be patient as I try to get it positioned so we can eventually close that door and then draw the thread up once we thread the machine and all that kind of stuff. And then eventually we're going to be doing some sewing on this machine. Believe it or not, we really are. So I'll come out a little bit more. All right, let me turn my screen around. Camera's locked in place. And now we will do our best to get this long beak shuttle back in place and be one step closer to sewing. Yes, Dr. Singer, they are very patient. They are very patient. But that's what happens in a classroom when you're trying to learn something. It sometimes takes a little bit of time to do it. So once again, as we're looking at this, this is the back of the bobbin right here. This is the front of the long beak shuttle. You can see where we've already, where are we? Hold on a second. This is the front of the long beak shuttle where we've got it all threaded up. And again, we're going to be drawing that thread to the side as we're sliding this into position. And this part of the long beak shuttle, where you can see it's the front of the long beak shuttle system, is going to be facing to the left, facing out when we put it back into place. Okay, so I'm going to do my best to slide it into position, kind of get it into so it's seated as best as I'm able. And then you have to kind of, it's a little bit tricky, you have to kind of make sure that long beak shuttle is orientated. Oops, I just knocked something over. That's okay. You have to make sure that long beak shuttle system, when we just put it back into the place, is orientated at the 12 o'clock position, if that makes sense. Here, we'll come out a little bit. Because if you don't have it orientated at the 12 o'clock position, when you go to and try to close that door, it's not going to close properly. It's not going to close for you. I'm just picking up all the stuff I just knocked down. All right. So I might have to block the camera just for a second just to make sure that I have it orientated correctly. And I do pretty much. Yay. Here, I'll come off the tripod. Because I really want you to, I don't want you to have to guess whether or not what you're suspecting is correct. I want you to know that it's correct. So let's do that real quick. So basically, as we're looking at this, as I come out on the shot, you can see how we basically slid it back into place. If I put my finger on there, just kind of push on it a little bit to make sure it's seated all the way in. It's seated in properly. And you can see I have it orientated so it's right near, if not at, the 12 o'clock position as we put it back into place. See that? We got the thread coming through there. It's coming over that band. That's the band right there near the bottom. And now we've got to see if we can close that door to lock it into position. So I'm gonna attempt that. If we have it orientated correctly, then it's going to snap right into position. If we don't, then I'll have to adjust it. So we did a great job. So it's locked in position now. You heard it click. And now what we have to do is get the machine threaded, and then we're going to try to draw this thread up so we can be one step closer to sewing, which is kind of the point of the whole premiere, right? But all this other stuff is important as well. And I showed it in other shots, but if you're ever curious about the Model A and where's the data plate and all that, there it is right there. If you didn't notice that in the other shot, it shows General Electric, it gives you the serial number, it tells you the model number and all that other good stuff as well. So it looks like that says Colorado, doesn't it? Yeah, CO. And remember, I'm looking at the little screen, and I've got the light from the workbench reflecting against it in that. So if when you watch, you know, when you watch it on the big screen, you're like, boy, the guy's losing his sight or something. He can't see it. I'm dealing with a lot of other factors here. So just remind yourself of that before you get too concerned about my ocular healthiness or something like that. Yeah. So at any rate, that's the little plate in there. So we did all the things to the long beak shuttle that we had to. Did a little bit more cleaning on it, lubricated it again, made sure that that thread is orientated correctly, put it back into the raceway, made sure it was orientated at the 12 o'clock position, closed the little door, and now we should be good to go down there. Okay? So now let's go back up on the tripod, because I think, you know what I'll do before I do that? Hold on a second. What I'll do before I do that is I'll show you the threading by pointing at it, and then we'll do it actually from a greater distance away, because I don't think I'm going to be able to do it with one hand, as talented as I might be. So come out on this shot a little bit. Again, it doesn't show this in the instruction manual, so I figured I would at least cover it. So coming off the spool, we're going to take that thread. First thing we're going to go through is this thread guide right here. Make sure, again, whenever you're threading a machine, that your take-up arm is at the highest position. Make sure that your presser foot is up. Okay? Presser foot has to be up so that it's not compressing those discs right here. When the presser foot is down, this is what happens. See that? Which means you may be able to force that thread to go between those discs a little bit, but if that presser foot isn't up, then you're not going to get that thread all the way seated in there, and you're going to have issues with what's happening down on the lock stitch. Okay? So off the top, through this thread guide, down between the discs, up around, you're going to come through that little take-up spring right there, which I'll zoom in on. Come on, focus, camera. So you have to kind of come underneath that little take-up spring right there, and then bring the thread up. And then after you come through that, and actually I apologize, you'll come through that little spring, and then you'll come underneath this little thread guide right here. You can see the spring right there, so bring the thread in between there, underneath here, up to the take-up arm, back across the faceplate through that thread guide, and there is no additional thread guide down here after you get to that point. It's basically from here straight down to the needle, and then you're going to be threading from left to right, and the flat side of the needle on this organ needle that I'm using has to be to the right, facing towards the pillar. Okay? And if you've never seen this setup before, this is common on a lot of the rotary machines, but these discs are going to rotate down when you're compressing to hold that presser foot attachment in place. And then if you want to take this presser foot attachment off like I did to clean it, then you have to rotate these this way to make those discs go up to release the pressure on that presser foot attachment. I'm just making sure it doesn't get loose or anything on me. Okay, so that's kind of the threading of it. Now I'm actually going to get back up on the tripod. I'm actually going to do the threading, and then we'll see if we can launch into some sewing. And the only thing tricky about this Model A, and it's true of some other machines as well, we're used to when we're going to be rotating that balance wheel, which on this model is right here, we're used to always rotating that balance wheel towards us. Most of the Singer machines are going to be like that. Most machines are going to be like that. On this machine, you have to rotate that balance wheel to the rear in order to pull that thread up when we get to that point. If you try, get everything all set up, you looked at the video, you got the long beak shuttle system set up, the threads orientated correctly there, all that's good to go, and you got your thread threaded correctly on the machine, and everything else is just set up perfect. And then you go ahead and try to pull that thread up, and it will not catch the thread. It won't catch the thread! What the heck is going on? Well, it's because the general rule with a sewing machine is whichever way that balance wheel is turning when the machine is in operation, which for most machines is going to be like this, towards you. That's the same direction you want to rotate that balance wheel when you're trying to draw that thread up. On this Model A, that balance wheel over here, when the machine is in operation, is going to be turning to the rear. So that's the direction that you need to turn this balance wheel when you're trying to pull that thread up. And that's true of any machine, that when you push on the foot control, if that balance wheel is turning towards the rear, then when you get ready to set up that machine to sew, you gotta turn that balance wheel the same direction that that machine, when it's operating in locomotion, you got to turn it the same direction in order to pull that thread up. If you try going the opposite way, you're gonna be there all day. You're gonna be there all day. Yes, I know, Mr. Singer Repairman, that's not a real good Brooklyn accent. I don't got a good Brooklyn accent, even though I watch the Bowery Boys. But that's a real important rule. Now, if that's something that's helpful to you, just type something in the chat, whatever you want to type. Thumbs up, smiley face, whatever. So that's a real important point to make, because I can't tell you how many messages I've gotten, how many messages Hans has gotten, Bill, Sonny, where people are saying the thread won't come up. And once we say to them, what kind of machine are you operating with? When you're operating that machine, when you push on the foot controller, which way is the balance wheel turning? Inevitably, they'll say, well, the balance wheel is turning to the rear. Okay, when you're trying to pull that thread up, which way are you rotating the machine? Well, the same way my mom showed me, to the front. It's not going to work. Oh, gosh, we have too much fun here. Yes, we do. All right, let's get this Model A threaded up and actually do some sewing on it. Yeah, we should do that. First of all, I'm going to jostle you, so close your eyes if you're prone to motion sickness, because I've got to get this tripod back in the correct place. All right. And yes, if you caught a glimpse of that, those are all custom machines over here too. All the way across, yeah. And there's overflow, and yeah, busy. All right, so I'm going to come in like right about there, and we'll get this threaded up. Okay, so once again, we're going to take the thread, we're going to come through this thread guide right here. You kind of come over the top. It goes through the little hole. Again, presser foot lever is up, take-up arm is the highest position. We draw it through these discs. And what I usually recommend is kind of hold that thread so when you draw it through those discs, you really know that it's going to go all the way as deep as possible into there. And then at the same time, what I'm doing is I'm wiggling that thread so that it's coming through the opening on that take-up spring, so that that take-up spring is going to be engaged in the process of sewing, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. And then we have to make sure that that thread goes underneath this little thread guide here, so that that spring is being actuated during sewing. Okay? Then we're going to be putting the thread through this take-up arm, and then we have to also go through that thread guide on the front of the faceplate. And I just dropped the thread in between there. Some of them will allow you to slide it past, but I didn't have much success doing that, so I just kind of threaded through there. Kind of try to thread it through there. Again, my hands are a little bit cold today. It is chilly willy down here. It is chilly willy like the penguin. And then what I usually do is I do drop, once I get to this point, I do drop that presser foot just because it exposes that needle a little bit better. And again, the whole point of having the take-up arm at the highest position when you thread a machine is it also makes threading it just a little bit easier. So I'm going to do my best to thread that needle, again from left to right. And there are no additional thread guides down from the faceplate to the needle. It's just free flowing. Raise your presser foot then, bring that thread to the rear. Okay, now we're finally ready to see if we can bring that thread up from the long beak shuttle below. Which way are we going to rotate this balance wheel over here? Which you can't see because it's off screen. Which way are we going to rotate that balance wheel? If you were paying attention, type it in the chat. So we've got our machine threaded up. We've got our raceway set up with the long beak shuttle. Now we're going to be holding onto the thread like you normally would on any sewing machine. We're going to rotate that balance wheel to try to bring that thread up. Most machines are going to be rotating it to the front. Is that correct for this Model A? I'm going to get a drink of water while you're typing whatever you want to type into the chat. Which way do we rotate the balance wheel? To the front or to the rear? And is that common for most sewing machines? Okay, you've had enough time. So if you typed in the chat, because when this machine is running, Scott, you're going to go with that as far as a cue to how to set up this machine to sew when you're pulling that thread up. So since this machine, when it's running, that balance wheel is turning to the rear like this, then we have to rotate it the same direction in order to effectively bring that thread up from that long beak shuttle. If you type that in, give yourself a pat on the back and you get a gold star for today because you're absolutely correct. So I'm going to hold on to that thread. We're going to apply that principle. See if we can rotate this little balance wheel over here to the rear and see if we can successfully pull that thread up from that long beak shuttle system. Still rotating, still rotating. And there we go. You may not be able to see it in the shot, but we have that little loop right there that just popped back up as it should. Now we're going to sweep that to the back. Try to sweep that to the back with my super cold hands. All right, so we've got our two threads, which are super static charged right now because of how dry the air is here right now in the winter. I'm going to close our door, our little plate, sliding plate. And at last, after I turn on the little sewing light here on the back, again this comes with a spotlight style light, we are ready to give this machine a try. And the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to manually rotate this to take that take-up arm all the way to the top. Whenever you're launching any sewing machine, you want to make sure that that take-up arm is at the highest point, and with just a tiny little inching of that balance wheel, it's starting to move towards the downstroke of that needle bar. That's going to give you the best success in launching successfully. The best success in launching successfully. Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but you know what I mean. So go ahead and get a drink of water, take a quick bathroom break if you need to, or whatever you need to do, and we're going to be launching into some sew-offs now, finally, and then we'll cover some other areas as well, including all the little markings I put on the inside of these books that my friends from California sent me. And I'll just show you real quick as we're doing this, because we're in a distance shot right now. I kind of started, after I got done with all the servicing of this machine, I started testing the stitch quality in that. Had some real good outcomes again with the top stitch, but was getting no definition hardly at all on that lock stitch. It was just absent. It was just totally absent. And so I started continuing to move through more phases of testing, started to get a little bit more definition right there, but still nowhere close. Then I moved into another type of cotton blend material, and there I was able to finally begin fine-tuning it, getting it to a point where the stitch was very evident actually I have that backwards. The stitch was real evident on the top stitch, and we were getting a lot better definition through the full stitch length range on the lock stitch as well. So you can see how many rows I did there in getting it adjusted properly. You know, and I probably went longer through the process and doing more confirmation sew-offs to check the stitch quality, but that's just my thing. But you can see here on this stitch off alone, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, well, I think 9 rows going through the full scope of the stitch length, from probably around 6 stitches per inch all the way down to close to 30 stitches per inch in the satin range. So I wanted to make sure that everything was good to go, and then I finally graduated into sewing off on this leather, this cowhide, single layer to start, and then eventually went to 2 layers, laying down just beautiful stitches top and bottom. So at that point I was like, okay, all right, we're ready for the premiere. We're ready. After doing all of these stitches, stitch offs, doing all of these stitch offs, my stitch off sandwich off camera. And there were additional ones I just threw into the garbage can because it was so out of whack initially. It was like, I don't even want to show those. I don't even want to show those. So, all right, so if you need to get a drink, if you need to make a quick bathroom break or whatever, that's totally cool. We're going to finally now launch into some sew-offs with this Model A by General Electric from the 1930s. I'll say the 1930s because somewhere between 1931 and 34, which was the same year, again, I mentioned this already, but 1934 was the same year that the Singer 221 was debuted at the Chicago World's Fair, and the same year that Singer would have stepped into the space of the Sew Handies and also into the General Electric space as well, and bought out, took over the company. So very strategic, those Singer folks, aren't they? Very strategic. And I didn't show you specifically, but you'll see me maybe goofing around with it during the premiere. This is the stitch length adjustment right down here on the front of the machine, built into the base. So you can see if it's all the way at the bottom, it's going to be set on the longest stitch, again about 6 stitches per inch. And if you move this slider all the way to the top, then you're going to be in the satin range, around 25 to 30 stitches per inch. There you go. That's how she works. That's how she works. All right, so let me lock this in place, and we will do some sewing on this machine. Finally. And because this is all kind of built around the hoopla of the Chicago World's Fair back in 1934, got to have a little bit of fair carnival style music in the background, at least initially. All right, I got my little drink of water. Hopefully you did as well. Now we're finally ready to put this Model A to the test. And I wouldn't give real high marks to the lighting system on this machine, but it's possible it's because I have an incandescent bulb in there, the original one. And if Louie and Sandra decide to replace it with an LED equivalent, I don't have one that matches this style. It'll make a big difference for them, I'm sure. So, all right, so why don't we launch right into some of this genuine cowhide. I'm going to go ahead and get it underneath the presser foot. Get that down. And we will go through a single layer, and then we'll basically duplicate what I showed you I did off camera. We'll add a second layer of genuine cowhide to it and try to complete that sew off as well. And then I've got a variety of other materials we're going to be sewing to demonstrate the readiness of this machine after my restore process. Okay? So here goes. Nothing lightweight about this if you look at it from the side. About 3 to 4 ounces of genuine cowhide. But again, this Model A is going to have a bigger motor than the Featherweight, probably close to 2 times the power of the Featherweight, kind of like the Spartan. The Spartan, again, is also known by the model number of 192K if you're brand new to vintage, if you're brand new to this channel. So when I refer to the Spartan, I'm referring to the Singer 192K, which comes with a 0.8 amp motor, which is going to be real close to what this Model A has. So again, we're talking about what many would argue is the predecessor to the Featherweight, that's going to be shorter in overall bed length like the 99K, but it's going to have about 2 times the power of the Featherweight. So it kind of makes sense why Singer wanted to buy this company out and have control over it, you know what I mean? That'd be a little bit scary. Yeah, a little bit scary. All right, so here goes a single layer of genuine cowhide with this Model A by General Electric from the 1930s. Here we go. Well, I don't know what you heard, but what I heard is music. And I'm not talking about the carnival music. I'm talking about the music of a machine that is running at the tip top of its game. Tip top, tip top. And I'll show you this sew off because it alone demonstrates that Louie and Sandra's Model A is ready to get the job done. So there's our top stitch, which I think you can see in the shot. We'll look at these later as well. It's just absolutely spot on, spot on. If we turn it over, nothing different. That lock stitch is exactly as it should be. Beautiful lock stitch. Beautiful lock stitch. All right, so let's add that other piece of leather. And isn't it great that that carnival music ended just perfectly so we can do this next sew off. And again, look at what we're going to be sewing. 2 layers of genuine cowhide, about 8 to 10 ounces of leather on this teeny tiny little baby Model A that has a lot of bite, a lot of grit. So let me slide this into position. Obviously we're going to be sewing it, and we'll have 2 stitch lines on the top. We'll only have 1 stitch line on the bottom because this machine is sewing the second layer now. That all makes sense. I'm explaining something you're like, we already got that, Scott. We sewed 1 layer, we're putting the other layer, well, blah, 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 blah. All right. Sometimes I explain things that don't have to be explained. But that's kind of what teachers do sometimes, isn't it? Because all students are different, and one student might be like, yeah, I get that, yeah. The other student's going, wait, what did he do? So we always side with the possibility that someone is going, what did he do? All right, so here goes 2 layers of genuine cowhide with Louie and Sandra's Model A by General Electric from the 1930s. All right, let's see how she does. Here we go. Come on, girl. She was initially a little bit like, I don't know, man, I don't know. Of course, that was partly me. I didn't do a stellar job of giving it enough gas either. I was kind of holding that gas back a little bit. It's like, give us more gas, give us more gas. But I can tell you decidedly that this machine, if you throttle it correctly for a heavier grade sew-off like that, it doesn't have any trouble at all after I've gone through that motor. That motor is just like, has so much reserve power. It's crazy, crazy for a machine like this to have that much reserve power. So let me just show you this. This top row is going to be the one that we just sewed. The bottom row is the first one we did. So you can look at those stitches, and I'll tell you one thing, it just doesn't get any better than that. That Long Beak shuttle system is operating at the top of its game, but it's not overpowering that lock stitch like it was originally when I first started my work on this machine. If we turn it over, we're going to see 1 row of lock stitching because we added that second layer. And through 2 layers of genuine cowhide, that lock stitch could not be any more picture perfect. It just couldn't be. It's just absolutely as it should be. Absolutely spot on. So I'm going to zoom in on these as well because I really want to show these to you close up. This is a testimony right here of how ready this Model A is. Again, a Model A that sat waiting for its opportunity for almost 10 years to be able to show its stuff at a premiere like this. Now the featherweight people can puff up as much as they want. Puff away, I don't care. But I would put the stitch quality of Louie and Sandra's Model A by General Electric against a featherweight any day of the week. Any day of the week. I'll just take my hand off the camera for a second. You can look at those yourself. If that's not spot on, then I don't know what spot on is. And if you look at the totality of the stitching, that is just wow. Wow! Apart from it molting all over the surface of the machine. That's really irritating. So if I turn it around, now we're looking at that lock stitch, and I don't know what you're going to be able to see. I'm going to pull it back again. I'm not sure what you'll be able to see if I zoom in more than what I've already shown you pulling it back, but that lock stitch through these 2 layers of genuine cowhide is also absolutely spot on. Let's zoom in on that. It just doesn't get any better than that, folks. It really doesn't. And again, if we look at it from the side, I'll kind of come in right about there. Look at it from the side, and I'll just kind of rotate it forward so you can see again the thickness of what we just sewed. That's the thickness of what 2 layers of genuine cowhide looks like. Yeah, I know. I know. But it's a playroom, folks, along with being a workshop. So we have fun and we do crazy stuff here. We just do. And the result is perfection. That's what I'm calling that right there. That's perfection. All right, I'm going to throw that to the back. Matter of fact, I'll throw it on the bed of the 99K. And we've got some more sewing to do. I've got that real light ribbon material. I've got that commercial upholstery material. I've got standard cotton polyester blend that we'll just be doing like a wide field of stitches on. I've got canvas. I've got compressed felt. I've got denim. So I think, yeah, I think by the time we get done, this machine will have definitely proven what it can do. And I think what we'll do next, just to contrast what we just did at a super heavy grade, super heavy duty level, is I think what we'll do next is we'll do this ribbon material. Let me get this into place. We'll just kind of buzz down the middle of it, and we'll lay down a stitch on this super slippery. It's basically 100% polyester, but it's made in such a way that it's like sewing on ice. I mean, it's super duper slippery stuff. And we'll go through 2 layers of that just to demonstrate the lighter side. You know, the more delicate fabrics that this machine is able to handle as well. It's not all about muscle and grit. It's also about you're able to sew the much more delicate materials as well, which I think is important. You want to know that you've got that capacity, that it's not just, you know, hardcore heavy duty. It'll cover the full spectrum of materials for you. All right, let me see if I can put on a little bit more. What do we got here? Act 1, Act 3. So the first piece that I played at the beginning of this, as a background to the video that you watched of the Chicago World's Fair back in 1934, when the Singer Featherweight 221 was introduced, was called Act 1, Tenebros Brothers Carnival. Tenebros Brothers Carnival. The next one I played a little bit ago was called Act 3, Tenebros Brothers Carnival. And now I'm going to be doing Act 2, Tenebros Brothers Carnival. That must have been a specific carnival. I don't know much about carnivals. Remember that? I mean, you probably don't remember it because maybe you're too young, but maybe you're not. But they used to have an organ in the middle of the merry-go-round, just like this. And as that merry-go-round was going around and around, you were riding on the horse or whatever you were riding on, maybe a bench, this music was playing. Gosh, it takes me back. What fun, what fun. Okay, let's sew this ribbon material now. And first of all, I have to take my take-up arm up because it's all the way down at the lowest position right now, which is not what we want. All right, so here goes 2 layers of this super slippery ribbon material, which is pretty much 100% polyester. All right, here we go. That worked out perfectly. You notice that? A little bit of talking, music ends. Here we go. If I could go straight, if I could sew straight, that'd be really good, huh? All right. Get that back into place. With our thread that is super static charge. Clip this thread and see what we can see. White thread on pink material, not the best thing, but let's see if we can see it here. And maybe I'll use my sew-off holder that Maddie sent me from Florida. Let's see if this will work. Okay, so this is going to be our top stitch that's facing out. Which again, I say all of you featherweight snobs, and yes, I own featherweights too, by the way. But any of you that are real snobbish about featherweights having the perfect stitch, page 34. Page 34. As my friend Emma and I always say, when you're looking at a stitch that is just perfection. So once again, we're looking at that top stitch, and in totality, we have to come out a little ways, but in totality, we're seeing a stitch that is absolutely spot on. We turn it around, let's look at that lock stitch and see how that looks. So we already know, looking at that top stitch, that our long beak shuttle is doing a spot on job. Now we'll see how that upper tension is doing in defining this lock stitch. Again, initially we started with a lock stitch that was practically, I mean, it had no definition whatsoever. Now look at it. Like I say, folks, if you had seen this machine and what it was capable of when it arrived at the workshop after waiting 10 years, as Louie and Sandra were trying to find somebody to restore it and get it back to working condition, and you're seeing what it's doing now, night and day, night and day. So that is a drop dead gorgeous. You can see the little bow in the bow right there, which is causing those stitches kind of lean forward, but those stitches are perfect alignment, spacing, formation, integrity of the stitch, presentation of the stitch, glory of the stitch is exactly as it should be. What was that, Dr. Singer? It looks better than what the Featherweight can do? We might get some mail over that, Dr. Singer. We might get some mail over that. But you know what? I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I agree with you. I think that's part of the reason Singer bought out this company, the company that was making all these machines, because they were nervous. They were nervous. Yeah. So that ribbon style material, or bow material, whatever you want to call it, 2 layers of that is an absolute pass. Absolutely spot on. And again, I'm not using an original needle in this Model A by General Electric right now. I'm using that organ needle that I showed you near the beginning of the premiere as a replacement needle. And as you can see by the sew-offs we're doing, it's absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on. So keep that in mind if you got a machine like this and you're trying to find a suitable replacement. Try going that path, and I think you'll be very pleased. You'll be very pleased. All right, I'm gonna get a little bit of water. Put on a little bit more carnival style music, and we will continue. I think what we'll sew next is a little bit of why don't we do some commercial grade upholstery material? I think that would be a good choice. So I've got this stuff right here. I've shown it a couple of times in recent premieres. You just look at that stuff and know that it's built for heavy duty, it's built for durability, it's used in high traffic areas on anything from a Davenport to a couch to a chair. It's going to stand up against wear and tear. It just is. Which means right away that needle piercing threshold is going to be through the roof on this stuff. And just doing 2 layers of it would be enough. That would be enough to prove the point, I think. But we're going to go ahead and try to do 6 layers, okay? So I've got 2 layers right now. I'm going to go ahead and fold it in the middle. Get us up to 4 layers. And then fold it one more time to get us all the way up to 6 layers on this commercial grade upholstery material. That, folks, is a mighty task for any machine. But I think that this Model A will be able to get the job done easily enough. So get that thread is just super charged right now with static. It's just crazy. And again, you're dealing with a machine, a Model A, that does not have a hyperextension. And we are about at the max right now as far as the clearance on that presser foot. We are right about at the max. There's not a lot of wiggle room in there at all. So I'm going to go ahead and lower that presser foot down. Off camera, I'm going to go ahead and increase our presser foot pressure a little bit because we're going through some super heavy grade stuff. And I did not test this off camera, so if 6 layers proves to be too much, not necessarily from a motor strength standpoint, but from a material feed standpoint, then I will bow at the material. I'll give it a quick little nod, and we'll drop it down to 4 layers. Because even 4 layers is crazy for this machine. Well, let's see how this Model A, again from the 1930s, does with 6 layers of commercial grade upholstery style material. Here we go. I'm kind of holding that power back a little bit right now. So I'm going to see if I can make that turn. See if I can make that turn. We're going to be going uphill a little bit. Now we're going to go down to the finish. All right, here we go. Keep your fingers crossed. Let me just change the orientation. There we go. All right, here we go. I am not going to close the box. Not going to happen. All right, so let's wiggle that out of there. Again, there's not a lot of, there wasn't a lot of happy room in there as far as clearance. That was just about, we were right about 6 layers is right about at the max. That's right at the max. All right. See if I can get this very curly thread to go back to the rear again. Yeah, if you're in a warmer climate and you never experience the dryness of the air in the winter, and that's not to say warmer climates don't get dry air as well, like Arizona, but the dryness in the air in Wisconsin is just really, really unique, where everything gets kind of a static charge to it. It gets to be real weird. You touch something, all of a sudden you get hit with like a 50,000 volt lightning bolt, it feels like. So let's get this set up and let's take a look at this sew off. Again, we did 6 layers of commercial grade upholstery style material with this little Model A. that again is shorter in overall bed length than the Featherweight, even shorter in overall bed length than the 99K. But I'll tell you one thing, it's got a lot of bite, a lot of grit. So here's our top stitch. Kind of go across there. I don't know what you're seeing. I'm seeing page 34. Folks, that is page 34. That top stitch, we went through that process of doing a little bit of cleaning and lubrication of that long beak shuttle. We made sure that our thread was orientated correctly so that that thread again is unwinding in the long beak shuttle. Which direction? This is a quick little impromptu for you. Type in the chat, when we put that bobbin back into that long beak shuttle assembly, which way did we make sure that that thread would be unwinding? Counterclockwise or clockwise? Type it in the chat. And while you're typing in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and turn this around and look at that lock stitch. Again, look at that from the side, folks. Oops. Forgot to lock the camera. Hold on just a second. All right, let's try that again now that I locked the camera. So look at the thickness of that, first of all. Then as I turn it around, we'll look at that lock stitch. So if you didn't type it in the chat yet, it's going to be probably a little bit too late. But if you did, give yourself a gold star and an A in the class today if you typed in clockwise. So again, the thing we needed to make sure of when we put that long beak shuttle assembly back in, I showed you how to do that. I showed you how to thread it, and we did a little bit of cleanup on it. We did all that kind of stuff. We popped the bobbin back into it. Again, it takes quite a bit of force to get that bobbin to slide back over that stem, that mounting stem. And then we made sure that when that thread was coming out of there, it was rotating clockwise. It's critical on this machine. It's critical. Now we're looking at the lock stitch on this machine. Again, a machine that started with like no lock stitch definition whatsoever. If you think that that's a good looking lock stitch, type in the chat page 34. You already saw the top stitch. And again, that's through 6 layers, folks. 6 layers of commercial grade upholstery material. And remember again, the lock stitch is going to be always harder to define because that machine is trying to pull that thread back up through all 6 layers of that upholstery material, fighting gravity, fighting viscosity and friction and everything else, trying to pull it back through to complete that stitch to lock it off. That is super duper tough. And yet, Louie and Sandra's Model A from the 1930s has done just I mean, we could stop right here. We could literally stop right here. And between the 2 layers, actually between the single layer and then the 2 layers of genuine cowhide, 8 to 10 ounces of leather, between that, the sew-off we just did, the slippery ribbon stuff, I would be confident in sending this machine out the door back to California knowing that it's going to do the job for these good folks. But we aren't even close to being done testing this machine yet. We still have to do commercial grade canvas. We've got to do the compressed felt. We've got to do the denim, heavy grade denim. And then we're going to go, after doing all of those sew-offs, including the ones off camera, then we're going to go down the stitch line and show the stitch range of this machine as well, going from the largest to the smallest. And that'll be our finish line. Like I said, any wonder why Singer bought the company out that was making these? Any wonder? And right in conjunction with their debut of the Featherweight 221, I think they were a little bit nervous. If you agree, if you think Singer was a little bit nervous in wanting to buy the competition out before they did their big debut of the Featherweight 221, type it in the chat. You can put something like scaredy pants or terrified or oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Whatever you want to type just for fun. Or, you know, a mouth holding, you know, an emoji face with the mouth hanging open or something like I don't know. Do whatever you want to do. So I'm going to throw this to the back as a definite pass. 6 layers of commercial grade upholstery material. Crazy, insane, sew off. And yet this Model A got the job done just like it was no big deal. No big deal. No big deal. Yeah. I'll throw that back on the bed of the 99K along with the ribbon material, the genuine elk hide, or genuine cowhide, excuse me. That's right, I didn't even cut any elk hide for this machine. Shame on me. Let me put on some carnival music and I'll cut a real quick strip of elk hide, which I had not done. So that was Act 2. Yeah, I don't need much time to cut it. This next one runs for only 46 seconds, and it's called Ambler Video Classica. All right, let me zoom in on the needle. Yeah, we almost always do elk hide. And I had all that other leather cut, and I was thinking, oh, that'll be enough. And it probably is enough, but it's almost sacrilegious to prepare a machine like this that was facing so many challenges and waited for almost a decade to be able to show its stuff. And then we're not going to sew elk hide with it? What's that about? You imagine if it went back to a circle of So Handy machines and other Model A's, and it was like, well, you must have not had enough confidence in you to sew that genuine elk hide that's chemically processed. You did all the other stuff. Yeah, that was great. That was really great. Great job. Great job. We're really proud of you. But you didn't do the elk hide, so maybe there's some doubt there. I don't want to have any doubt when it comes to Louie and Sandra's Model A from the 1930s. So I'm going to get that elk hide in place, and we'll see how this Model A, this teeny tiny little machine, can do with a task like this. And again, as I'm adjusting that needle to get that take-up arm to the highest position, I'm rotating that balance wheel to the rear, not to the front, because that's the direction the machine is going to be running. Make sense? All right, so now we're going to go after this elk hide. We'll see if this incredible performance continues or whether or not I've taken things too far. All right, here we go. Come on, girl. We know you can do it. Yeah. Again, that's more of an issue of how far my foot is down on that little foot controller than the machine having any trouble sewing it. I'm being hesitant because I know I've got this one needle in the machine and I've got one other needle that I plan on keeping until I can order more of them. In case I get another So Handy or Model A that comes in, I've got to have a needle ready for it. So I can't afford to break a needle. So I'm kind of pampering this Model A little bit, and it's probably getting irritated. Probably going, hey, I can handle this. Can you? So, yeah. Any rate. As a matter of fact, okay, I hear you. Like I said, if you listen close enough, machines will talk to you. So this is the first stitch off that we just did, right here. The stitches are absolutely as they should be. You can see that in the shot. It's a short enough piece of genuine elk hide. Top stitch is absolutely as it should be. We turn it over, no difference. This elk hide actually does a beautiful job of highlighting that lock stitch. Just absolutely spot on. And I don't want you to have to go back, little Model A. I don't want you to have to go back and if you're in the circle with other Model A's or you're in the circle with other sew hand eaters and they're like, yeah, you did the elk hide, but I don't know, it kind of looked like you were struggling with it a little bit. It kind of looked like you had trouble. You had trouble. I don't want that to be the case. Again, I'm really sensitive. It's kind of like peer pressure when you're growing up in school and all the kids are always wanting to pick on different kids for this and that. And I want this Model A to say, I got every sew off that master restorer guy, Scott, known in some circles as the cow guy, other circles as the Rolls Royce guy, and just the dude, everything that guy threw at me, I got it done, and I got it done in Brooklyn style. You know what I'm talking about? I got it done in Brooklyn style. So let's give us another rundown now without that hesitation, because I'm going to give this little machine enough gas and we will launch into this and get it done with no hesitation at all. All right, you ready? Here we go. Yeah, that's more like it. That's more like it. And kind of like in the movie Cars, if you ever saw that animated movie Cars, when that little forklift thing that does the tire changes on the race cars steps in the line with all the other fancy ones, and he kicks it into gear, taking off those lug nuts, just like zoom, 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 zoom. If you haven't seen that movie, you got to watch it because it's phenomenal. That's what this little Model A just did. So this top stitch is the one that we still have the threads on. As a matter of fact, I'm going to leave the threads on it so we can look at it, so that it's clear which one we just did. The top row is the one we just did, right? Look at those stitches. That's our top stitch, obviously. And I wasn't even all the way down on that foot control. I just gave it more gas instead of being all hesitant and stuff. Absolutely spot on stitches, top stitch. Turn it over. Nothing different on that lock stitch that we just mowed down at probably about 30 to 40% power. 30 to 40% power, and there was no hesitation like that first row that I did, this row down here, where that needle hit the leather and just stopped, kind of like I can't do it. Second one, instead of setting it up for failure, I said, okay, I'm going to hit that pedal with more conviction, more determination, more drive. And look at what it did. Lock stitch, page 34. Let me turn it over. Top row is the one we just did. Pedal to the metal, almost. Top stitch, absolute perfection. Again, look at that from the side if you're new to this channel. Genuine elk hide, chemically processed, about 4 ounces of leather that is crazy to try to get through. And this Model A did a beautiful job both times. It just did a better job the second time because I set it up for success. I gave it more power. I reached down into that foot controller and I said, okay, let's go for it. Let's go for it. And you saw what this machine did. Yeah. So you know what, little Model A, you hold your head high. You go into some circles with those other Model A's or some of the other big boy machines, big girl machines, and they start saying, so what are you all about, little guy? You show them this Premiere. You show them this Premiere and say, this is what I'm about. This is what I'm about. That's a definite success. To the back with that genuine elk hide, along with the 6 layers of commercial upholstery material, along with that slippery ribbon material, along with those 2 layers of genuine cowhide. Man, oh man. Man, oh man. This little Model A has shown what it's about, son. Yep. So let's move into some upholstery material now without any delay. I'm not even going to get any water. I'm not going to put any music on. We're just going to jump right into this upholstery material. And I'm going to, just to be aware of the fact that I've got this one needle in here and I've done all the sewing that I've done, instead of pushing this commercial grade upholstery material, excuse me, commercial grade canvas material, this is canvas. Instead of pushing this commercial grade canvas material to 6 layers, I'm only going to do 4, which is still enough. I could do 6. That's not a problem. But even 4 layers, look at that from the side. So I'm going to get this under the presser foot, and we're going to go down and around with these 4 layers of commercial canvas. And this stuff, again, this blue stuff is going to be as difficult, if not more so, than the U.S. Army grade canvas. Okay? So I got to get my take-up arm all the way up. Again, rotating the balance wheel. Which direction? Type it in the chat. Are we rotating the balance wheel to the front or to the rear to get ready for this next sew-off? What did I just do? All right, while you're deciding what that answer is, I'm going to go ahead and do this next sew-off. 4 layers of commercial grade canvas. Here we go. Okay, if you said rotate the balance wheel to the rear, you are absolutely spot on. Here we go, to the finish. All right, now I'm a little bit cockeyed here, but I'm going to see if I can close the box off for my box closer friends. All right, hold on. There we go. You can just get a little feeling for the amount of power that this machine has, can't you? And I'm not even giving it all of the gas. When I had this thing unthreaded and I got done with my restore on it, my servicing and everything, and I went pedal to the metal, I mean full throttle, this thing will blow your socks off. It will blow your socks off big time. All right, so let's take a look and see how this Model A from the 1930s, made by General Electric. Again, some people argue the predecessor to the Featherweight, the original Featherweight, or as the books that Louie and Sandra sent me, before the Featherweight. Let's see how it did on these 4 layers of commercial canvas, commercial grade canvas. All right, let me get my little thread holder thing out. All right, let's check this out. You know what? I wouldn't even have to move the camera. You can already see. Can you see what I'm seeing? If you're thinking of the same page reference that I always make about a perfect stitch, type it in the chat. Type it in the chat. I'm going to come right from here. I'm not even going to go back a second time. That's 4 layers right there. We'll come out on the totality of the stitching. Let me turn that around so we can look at the lock stitch. Again, any wonder as to why Singer bought out the company that was making the Model A and the Sew Handies leading up to, I mean, just months within doing the debut of the Featherweight? I think they were scared stiff. I genuinely do. This is our lock stitch now, folks. 4 layers of commercial grade canvas. Let's zoom in on these. And I don't have that angle quite enough, but you can see it. Page 34. As Emma sometimes jokes, page 34, second edition. I'll let go of the camera, I'm jiggling it. And again, I'm making an additional sweep past these lock stitches because again, the lock stitch is going to be a much more difficult task for any sewing machine than that top stitch. And that is absolutely page 34. 4 layers of commercial grade canvas. I'm going to throw that on the bed of the 99K. And that is a definite pass. That's a definite pass, folks. It really is. I don't know how much more I should do. I've got to do this, partly because it matches the machine so beautifully. Don't you agree? We got to try to do 3 layers of this compressed felt. I mean, it almost be like one of those things. It'd be a missed opportunity because it just matches this machine to the hilt. Okay, so here's our compressed felt, and if you're brand new to this channel, I know we've gotten a lot of new subscribers as we're real close to that 10,000 subscriber milestone. So if you're brand new to this channel and you're like, okay, what's the big deal about this compressed felt? The compressed felt is the only material that I've sewn on any machine in this workshop that snapped one of my Schmetz needles. And we're talking about a size 90 or 100, which is like a 14 or 16 size needle. That's a big needle, folks. And this stuff snapped it right off during one of my sew-offs. So, and I'm going to see if, you know what, I shouldn't get the cart before the horse. I should see if these 3 layers of compressed felt will actually fit underneath there, because this is real tight. Yeah, we're just going to make it. We're just going to make it. That's the only thing about this Model A that might be a point of criticism, is the presser foot clearance is a little bit constrained. It's a little bit constrained. But I think it'll still get the job done. So let's see how this Model A does on one of our last sew-offs with 3 layers of compressed felt. Here we go. I am nervous. Like I said, I don't have a ton of these needles. I only have one other needle. I'm like, please don't break, please don't break. All right, here we go. Down to the finish, and we're not going to close the box. 3 layers of compressed felt. Here we go, folks. Here we go. And yes, I am babying it a little bit because I'm like, I do not want to break a needle. I do not. Nope. Nope. Don't want to do it. Oh, you know what? I forgot to bump up the presser foot pressure just a little bit, but we still had a very good outcome. But this stuff does require a little bit more presser foot pressure, even more so than the leather or the upholstery material, just because of how these fibers are compressed in that. It just makes it a little bit trickier, and material feed is a little bit more of an issue when you're talking about a material like this. But I still think we got a very good outcome, so we'll see. Oh yeah, we definitely did. We slammed it. So this is going to be our top stitch that we're going to look at first. Look at our top stitch, and then we'll move over to our lock stitch. Alright, that should be orientated pretty well, I think. This is our top stitch, and then we'll flip it over for our lock stitch. And these, just because of the nature of the material, we'll go 1 row at a time. Folks, I hate to be stuck in a rut, but I'm just going to say page 34. 2nd edition. I'm not even going to go around again. I'll come out to the totality of the stitching. That is absolutely spot on, folks. That's absolutely spot on. Those stitches could not be any better formed going through a material like this after all the other sewing we've already done. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. This is our lock stitch that we're going to look at now. And when you see the definition of this lock stitch, again, knowing that a lock stitch is so much more difficult for a machine to produce, you're going to be like, holy mackerel, that long beak shuttle thing was kicking the butt of that top stitch. We don't even have to go all the way in. That long beak shuttle system was kicking the butt of that lock stitch, and after Scott went through all of his adjustments, look at what that top stitch now, or excuse me, look at what that upper tension now is doing with that lock stitch. There's no longer a lock stitch that has no definition. It's flat. There's no poppiness to it. It's now like, look at me. Look at me. Through 3 layers of compressed felt. Along with one of Hank's hairs. Right there, I think. Yeah. So folks, that is page 34, second edition. That is spot on. That's the type of stitching that anyone is hoping for. And again, I would put this stitching against a featherweight any day of the week. Any day of the week. So go ahead, Singer, buy out this company, because it's only going to make you look better in the end because of how well this Model A from the 1930s executes a sewing field of diverse materials like this and diverse thicknesses that's just off the charts. It's off the charts. So that's a definite pass. That's going to go back by my 99K as well. I'm going to move this to the side without catching it in the thread, hopefully, which is what I just did. Yikes. Okay, and I'm going to put a little bit of water in my hands and just gently touch that spool of thread on top to add just a tiny little bit of moisture to it, because this thread is getting super polarized right now with static. You may not be able to tell that in this premiere, but I am battling this thread right now because of the how dry the air is in the workshop. So all I did, and you can use the same little trick at home, all I did is put a little bit of moisture on my hands, and then I went up to this spool pin and I just rubbed my fingers gently across the thread, adding just a little bit of moisture to it, because this stuff down here, you can see it, and I even put a little bit of moisture on that as well, and it's still curly as, you know, if any of you have real curly hair, and when it gets to be, you know, a certain type of, the climate changes, too much rain, too little rain, whatever it is, and your hair all of a sudden goes from semi-curly to like mega curly. That's kind of what I'm battling right now with these, with this thread in this super dry workshop environment. So before I jump into the next sew-off, which probably will be denim, let me come out on the shot on this little Model A and just show you what we already sewed. Just give you an appreciation for what we've already covered. So in totality, as I love to say, this is the sew-off sandwich that we've done so far. So on top, we just did the compressed felt. We did the commercial grade canvas material right here, the blue stuff. We did the single layer of genuine elk hide. We did the 6 layers of commercial grade upholstery material. We did this slippery ribbon material that's like 100% polyester. It's basically like trying to sew snot, if such a thing were possible. And then the 2 layers of genuine cowhide. Just absolutely insane. I'll put the leather together and then you can look at it again. Our sew-off sandwich, that would be more than enough. That would actually be way over the top for most people that were demonstrating a machine. But my standards at this workshop, as you already know, and it's why all of you will go out of your way to get a machine here, my standards here are off the charts. They're off the charts. So this is what we've done so far. Now we're going to do some denim, and then finally we're going to show the stitch length range of this little Model A with a final sew off on a cotton polyester blend, just kind of going large stitch all the way down to teeny tiny. So what do you think, Louie and Sandra? Are you impressed with your little Model A yet? I think everybody else is, and I'm guessing you are as well. This machine came in, it was barely turning over, and after all of the work on it, along with a rubber band on that little pulley off the motor so the belt wouldn't slip, and now we are just we're just knocking it out of the park. Just knocking it out of the park. Amazing. All right, let's do some denim, and then we're almost at the finish line. So I've got 2 layers of this stuff, 2 layers of denim. I'm going to go ahead and fold it in the middle, get us up to 4 layers, fold it one more time, get us all the way up to 6 layers. That's what 6 layers of denim looks like, folks. 6 layers of denim. So let me see, again, presser foot clearance is a little bit limited on this Model A. Let me see if I can get it underneath there. I think I can. And we will go down and around, and then we'll be almost at the finish line. We are really, really close to the finish line. So 6 layers of heavy grade denim, and let's see how this Model A does on this. I mean, it's just, if you're not amazed by what it's done on all the other sew-offs, then wow. Okay. So here we go, 6 layers of heavy grade denim, take-up arms all the way up. If it isn't all the way up on this Model A, then I'm going to rotate that little balance wheel to the rear. All right, here we go. This is some tricky denim, real tricky denim. It's kind of shifting on me a little bit as I'm trying to get it to sew straight. It is tricky stuff. It's kind of buckling and puckering and all kinds of other stuff. Come on, girl. There we go. Okay, down to the finish. 6 layers of heavy grade denim. Here we go. That's a little bit of a load. That's a little bit of a load for this machine. And part of it is just how it's feeding. And again, there's not a lot of wiggle room underneath that presser foot for those feed dogs to have a little bit of breathing room to do their job along with the presser foot. So this, well, you can just see the way it's sewed with that quilted pucker in the middle and everything else. This 6 layers of denim was probably one of the biggest challenges that we put this Model A through today. And we'll have to see how she did. See how she did on stitch quality, because that's really what it's all about, right? Stitch quality is what it's all about in the end. Is doesn't matter if the machine, you know, does it with absolute ease, kind of like it did on that leather when I did it the second time. And it's what did it lay down as far as stitching. So let's look at the top stitch first with this super crazy quilting pucker thing going on. I'll get my stitch off holder here that Maddie sent me. And you know what? I may not be able to use it on this one because of that pucker. We may have to go with a lean against the needle bar on this one, and then hold it with the clippers. I think that's going to be our best bet. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and take a look at these stitches now. We're almost at the finish line as far as our stitch offs, and we'll take a look at these stitches on these 6 layers of heavy grade denim. This was a tougher sew off, even with me doing a better job of managing that power. And yet look at what this machine just did. Folks, that's page 34. Maybe 3rd edition. That's even better than a 2nd edition. Of course, I guess in books, 1st edition is the best, right? So why don't we say that? This machine going through a sew-off as tough as this is page 34, 1st edition. Look at those two side by side. Folks, that's impressive. That really is. That is darn impressive. Let's look at the. I will need to get a drink of water. Let's look at the totality of the stitching as I get a little sip of water, and then we'll flip this around and look at that lock stitch. Again, folks, this is 6 layers of heavy grade denim. Let's turn this around, look at that lock. But first of all, let me lean it towards you. Look at the thickness of that. If you aren't impressed, I forgot to lock the camera, daggone it. If you are impressed by something like that, then holy mackerel. I don't know what other sewing channels you're watching, but I think we do some crazy, amazing, you gotta be kidding, what the heck was that stuff on this channel. So I think you probably are impressed. Let me turn around, we'll look at that lock stitch. Again, the lock stitch is always going to be tougher to get clear definition on. I know a lot of people are all about top stitch because they're making certain products in that. I get it. But it's a lot easier to get a defined top stitch than it is a lock stitch any day of the week. Look at that. This is our lock stitch, folks. Like I said, if we had just a little bit more space for those feed dogs to do their work, it would be even better. But this is still page 34, second edition. Look at that from the side. Good gravy. Let's look at the totality of the stitching for this lock stitch through 6 layers of heavy grade denim. Folks, that's brag-worthy. That is absolutely brag-worthy. So I'm going to throw this one to the rear as well. That again is our lock stitch. This is our top stitch that we just looked at before. That's going to go in our sew-off sandwich in the rear over by that 99K. And we only have one more sew-off to do that's going to be a series of sew-offs. It's going to be using this polyester blend type material, polyester cotton, and we're going to start with the largest stitch and then work our way down to the smallest stitch on this Model A. And that's going to be it. That's going to be it, and don't throw a fit, because we have covered, as you'll see when we review all of the stitch offs again, we more than covered the spectrum on this machine. Big time. I'm wondering one thing, because I don't know how low my bobbin thread is getting. Let me do this real quick. I'm going to turn this sideways. We'll sew a little bit shorter length so that I can play with being cautious and not run on a bobbin thread. That'd be disappointing, but then I'd be able to show you how to wind a bobbin on this, which with your finger and your thumb is kind of cool and different. All right. So we're going to do our largest stitch, and we're going to go all the way down, stage by stage by stage, to a point of doing the smallest stitch that this Model A can do. So that last one we did was called Carnival Intrigue, I think. Or was it the one before that? Hold on. No, I think we did Ambler Video Classica. I don't know if we did Carnival Intrigue or not. Let me try that. Carnival Intrigue. Oh, we definitely didn't do this one. This is called Carnival Intrigue. And they didn't have anything under fair, so I just went with Carnival, because Carnival and fairs kind of go hand in hand, you know what I mean? Let's zoom in on this. All right, so we're doing longest, then I'm going to be moving that stitch length controller, which is just right down here. Where is it? Kind of underneath the edge of that material right there. We're going to be starting all the way down here, and then I'll slowly be moving it up in increments until we get all the way to the top into that satin range. Okay? All right, here we go. Longest stitch to shortest stitch. Here we go. This has kind of a Latino feeling to it. Maybe it's like a Latino carnival, if there is such a thing. Probably is. If Bill is at this premiere, he's loving that organ right now. He loves organs. Okay, so we just did that one. And now we're going to do, I'll move that stitch length adjuster down just slightly to make that stitch a little bit shorter. All right, here we go. Can you see that thread? Oh my gosh, this hair is so dry. All right, so I'm making another adjustment on that stitch length to make it even shorter. Here we go. That was a fun song, wasn't it? Like I said, it had kind of a playful Latino carnival type feeling to it. So any of you that are familiar with the Latino ethnicity and such, if they have, I know they love gatherings. I lived in a Latino community a number of years ago, and they would love to get together and just have wonderful family gatherings and all that. But if you've ever been to a Latino carnival or fair or something like that that's specifically orientated towards that ethnic group, I'd be curious to know, because I don't know if they do have such things or not. But I think I'd like to be there. I would love to be there. All right, so I'm going to adjust our stitch length up a little bit further. We probably have like another 2 sew-offs, 3 sew-offs to do before we hit our max as far as the smallest stitch that this Model A will do. All right, here we go. Let me just adjust our take-up arm. Here we go. Oh yeah, we're getting down there. We're getting down there. We're getting way down there. See that thread? And this again is very good thread. I get it at Joann Fabrics. It's called Americana quilting thread. It's a fabulous thread, plus it's cheaper than Walmart's equivalent of the Coates and Clark. And but it tends to be a little bit sensitive about being curly. It gets curly, curly, curly. So I'm going to adjust the stitch length again, get us down even further into that satin range. And then I'll just have 1 sew off after that to get us to the max. All right, here we go. Can you hear that machine running? Gosh, I hope you can. It just runs silky, silky smooth now. Again, I'm not going to say it purrs. Nothing against our cat friends or our cat lovers. But I've never heard a machine purr. But I've definitely heard it hum and just ooze with silky sounds. Ooze with silky sounds. It's oozing right now. Yep. Good thing I have shoes on. That's all I'll say. All right. Okay, this will be our final sew off right here. And I'm moving that stitch length selector. The last sew off we just did, we're probably about 90%. Now I'm going all the way to the very top, to the shortest setting on this Model A. All right? So you should really see this machine working as it's laying down a stitch somewhere between 25 to 30 stitches per inch. That is tiny, very tiny. All right, here we go. Oh my gosh. That is small. That is very, very small. That is teeny tiny small. Teeny tiny small. Alright, let's give that thread a clip. That one. So we could have done it in any incremental movements, you know what I mean? We could have probably covered the full spectrum of the stitch length range on this machine in 3 sew-offs. But I wanted to cover it in smaller increments so you could really see the dramatic change from the largest to the smallest. And I can see I've got a lot of excess material, so let me cut this down a little bit so I can use that other material on another premiere. Okay, so that's our sew off that we just did. Check the camera shot. Yeah, that should be pretty good. Holy macro, you can actually see it from that angle pretty nicely, can't you? We'll set it up on that sew-off display holder that Maddie sent me that I kind of modified a little bit. And we've gotten a couple of inquiries about that. I don't know if folks are planning on copying our design and making money or something like that, but I guess that's okay. As long as they give us some credit, I think would be nice. But we started with kind of a Scrabble base that Maddie sent me. She sent me 4 of them actually, because she had seen me struggling with different premieres trying to display the sew-offs, and she's a sweet gal, and she said, I'm going to help them out. And then I discovered they worked beautifully, but for some sew-offs, depending on the profile of the material, it was a little bit harder to show the sew-off because it was tilty, you know, it was trying to fall over or something like that. So then I added these pole extensions, which was a matter of, let me just show you, it's a matter of drilling into the Scrabble board, adding wire supports, and then putting these covers over them so that I didn't have bare wires sitting there. And the covers are basically from a hanger. You know, some of the pants hangers will have the covering on them so that you don't have like something rough against the pants. That's what these are that I innovated into the design. So if this idea is worth millions of dollars, someone develops it, hopefully they remember us. So the first sew off we did is this top row right here. That's at the max setting. Then I went down to a slightly shorter stitch right here. That second row. Went down smaller yet to this third row. Beautiful stitching. Went down further to this row. And finally down to this, well, we have 2 more. I thought we had 1 more. Down to this row. And then finally down to this row, which is the max setting, which is going to get us right around 25 to 30 stitches per inch. Folks, those are beautiful stitches. From the largest setting to the smallest setting. Those are absolutely spot on. Each one of them, I think, deserves a page 34, 2nd or 3rd edition, maybe even a 1st edition. But I think it just shows right away how well this machine is sewing now through so many diverse sew-offs. Just crazy the number of sew-offs we did. Sucker's trying to lean forward, is trying to tip over. Alright, I'm doing my best here. It's trying to kind of curl forward. Doesn't want us to see that lock stitch. Come on, come on, be proud of your lock stitch. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful lock stitch. So this again is our lock stitch through these 2 layers of cotton blend. That's our largest stitch, right around 6 stitches per inch. We went to our next row. Kind of showing them both at the same time there. Then our next row. Next row. Next row. And our last row. Absolutely unbelievable. Unbelievable. And that's sewing at that level. When I'm talking about level, I'm talking about the intricacy of laying down 25 to 30 stitches per inch after all the sewing that we've already done on this needle. And again, this is not even an original needle that the factory would have issued with the machine or would have been available back in the 1930s. This is an organ needle that I've used as a replacement, that I already showed you all the specs of that, so you can go out and get yours as well. Let's look at the sew-off sandwich. Let me move this to the side. I'll set that right there. So you can again be reminded of what we already sewed. This is the sew-off sandwich that we've done live on this premiere today. Do I like to have absolute confidence in a machine before it leaves the workshop? What do you think? This shows confidence, folks. There's other folks that would be terrified to try something like this on a live premiere. They would be terrified. They'd be as scared as Singer about the idea of not buying this company that made this Model A. That's on camera. Off camera, I did all of this. You already saw this. Off camera, on camera. I'll just say it. I've got the best machines in the world, and in this case, this machine belongs obviously to Louie and to Sandra. Now that it's been in this workshop and gone through my process, it is, hands down, no questions, the best running General Electric Model A in the world. It's the best Model A in the world. It could walk into circles right now, and I'm just going to put all the sew-offs together, the ones before and after. Look at that. It can walk into any circle in the world and hold its head high, without a doubt. What do you think, Dr. Singer? Yep, I agree. This machine has bragging rights, big time. All right, I'm going to do a couple things real quick because we are running, I know, tight on time. And I don't even know if I have enough space on my memory card. I hope I do. I really do. I wanted to do a quick comparison and showing you measurements on these machines to give you an idea of space. And I'm not going to repeat it because I'm going to do this fast. You're just going to have to make a note of what the measurements are and rewind after the premiere and that. But I just wanted you to know comparatively the Model A to the 99K to the Singer Featherweight, kind of the differences in bed space, harp space, etc. I think that's a helpful thing to know, don't you? If you do, just type it in the chat, you know, thumbs up, smiley face, whatever. That is a helpful thing to know. And in the meantime, I'm going to lock the camera, spin it around. We're going to jump into this fast and furious. All right. So first of all, overall, I got to wipe this machine off after all that sewing. It's driving me nuts. First of all, we're going to look at this Model A, which is our star in this premiere. We'll get the measurements on this machine, mainly focusing on core measurements, including harp space, just so you know. All right. So, and we will do this in inches, not in centimeters. So from end to end, overall bed length, you're looking at approximately 10.5 inches. 10.5 inches, okay? Front to back, 6.5 inches. Now we're going to focus on harp space. Harp space is again from the needle to the pillar. So needle to the pillar, center of the needle to the pillar. Let me do this. 5 1/4, 5 1/4 inches. And the way you again measure that is from the center of the needle to the edge of the pillar. So we're looking at 5 1/4 inches. I already measured this, but I'll measure it again. Front to back, right around 6 1/2 inches. And then vertical clearance for the harp space from the bed up to the bottom of the arm is going to be right around 4 inches. Okay? Now if we go back to the featherweight, and I'm going to have to move the Singer repairman. Sorry about that, sir. Actually, I'll move you to the back. That'll be fine. Now we're going to do the featherweight. And I know there's two different ways to measure the featherweight. One is with the bed down, one is with the bed up. But have you ever seen somebody sew with a featherweight with the bed up? I never have. Because when the bed is up, it's pressing against that faceplate, and there's like no room to move the material, so it's not even a practical measurement. I think it's kind of silly. So, overall bed length of the Singer featherweight is going to be 15 inches. 15 inches. That's with the bed down, which is the only way you can use the machine, duh. Okay, so the width, and I'm just going to measure the extension bed, which is going to be basically the same as the rest of the bed. You're looking at about 6 3/4 inches. 6 3/4 inches. Now let's do the harp space. And yes, this is a little bit awkward. I'm kind of leaning in and around as best as I can. So center of the needle to the inside pillar is going to be right around 5 inches. We've already done from front to back, but I'll do it again. Front to back, you're looking at right around 6 3/4 inches. Let me just double check that. I've got it tilted a little bit. Yeah, right around 6 3/4 inches I think is a fair measurement. Then from the bed to the bottom of the arm, you're looking at right around 4 1/4. So it's about 1/4 inch higher in the harp space than the Model A. I think the Model A was 4 inches if I remember correctly. If any of you are writing this down, it really would be awesome. Because then you could type in the chat what the summary is. Because I'm not keeping track of it, to be honest with you. So those are the measurements on the featherweight. Now I'm going to go over to the 99K. So overall bed length on the 99K is going to be 12 inches from front to back. It's going to be 6 1/2, just a little bit less wide than the featherweight. I think the featherweight was 6 3/4 approximately. Now we're going to do the harp space from the middle of the needle, basically right where that throat plate opening is, to the inside of the pillar is going to be right around 6 1/4, 6 1/4. And I think I already measured front to back. Yep, I did that. Now I'm going to do the height, which is going to be pretty impressive. That's going to be 5 inches. So the 99K is going to have the highest vertical clearance in the harp space out of either of the two machines. And then if you made a note of what the other measurements are, you've got those. But I think that's good information to have. And if any of you wrote it down again, that would be awesome. If you want to type it into the chat, that would be super cool. So let me do this. Now we're going to take a real quick peek at progress shots. I was going to try to weigh the machines as well, but I don't think that that's going to be a practical thing to try to do at this point. And I might have to refresh all these. We'll see. Maybe not. All right, so progress shots now. And some of these are right at the very beginning when I got the machine and I was starting to examine it. So here you can see those two books and the case that this Model A comes in, along with the owner's manual right in the middle there. Some real good material resources, and I was hoping to cover more of that during the premiere, but I don't know that we're going to have time. But in essence, the Model A is in a family of machines that are sometimes all clumped together. I'm just going to look that up real quick so I can at least give you that information without going into all the particulars of this manual, because we just don't have the time to do it. But for your reference, the first machine to come out within this So Handy family was the Standard, produced from the earliest production in February through August of 1928. following that, there was the So Handy, which is considered the mid-production period, which was from August 1928 through early 1929. Then the standard version, which was the late version, produced from the early 1929, from early 1929 through mid 1929. And then again, so those are all kind of the So Handy ones, right? So we basically have three different ones, three variants, as the book says. And then following that, in 1931 until 1934, the Model A that we've looked at today, that belongs to Louie and to his wife, Sandra, was produced. So we had these three earlier variants, and then following that, we had from 1931 to 1934 the Model A being produced. So hopefully that's helpful. A lot of other stuff in this book that I had marked, but I just don't know that we have time to cover it. I'll just give you a quick skinny on the Model A. It's in this book as well, on page 29. So the next So Handy machines, and again they're calling them So Handy, but technically that's not correct. This is not, the Model A is not part of the So Handy family technically. It's kind of a distant cousin. It's a standalone Model A by General Electric. Let's see, identified as the General Electric Model A. Production stopped in early... See, this book is disagreeing with what I found otherwise. It's saying they stopped production in 1932, but I'm showing it being produced until 1934, so I think we're going to have to agree to disagree on that. The Model A's were manufactured for GE from July... Wait, now it's changing it again. See, this doesn't make any sense. This book says the production stopped in 1932, but then it goes on in the very next paragraph to say the Model A's were manufactured for GE from July 1931 until mid-1934 by the Frederick Osmond Corporation. That's the distinction. Okay, I get it now. I get it now. Okay, let me kind of come out of this shot. I get it now. So as I'm looking at this, what they're saying is General Electric themselves made the machine until 1932, and then a new company stepped in, the Osann Corporation, O-S-A-N-N, at the Standard Sewing Machine Company of Cleveland, Ohio, and they made it up until 34 for the last 2 years. And then in mid-1934, Singer bought out the Frederick Osann Company and subsequently formed a dummy corporation, the Osann Corporation, to continue manufacturing the Standard Sewing Machine product line from mid-1934 on for a couple of years. The Osann Corporation Singer manufactured the Model A for GE. So GE made it until 32, and then from 32 to 34 approximately, Singer, through a dummy corporation called Osann Corporation, continued to make the Model A for General Electric. Let's see, like the later Frederick Osann Company and all the Osann Corporation Singer So Handy machines, the GE Model A machines produced after mid-1932 had cast iron beds that increased their weight to 15 3/4 pounds. Some of the 11 3/4 pound GE models were made out of aluminum beds, but are more rare. So they're basically saying if a magnet sticks to yours, it's the cast iron Model A. It's the cast iron Model A. And I did do a magnet test on the machine that belongs to Louie and Sandra, and the magnet does stick to it. So it would have been the later models after 1932, because I think they're implying that the ones leading up to 32 were aluminum, and then the later ones from 32 to 34 would have been made out of cast iron. If I understood that correctly, I think I am. I think I am understanding that correctly. Yeah, after mid-1932. So somewhere between 32 and 34 is the date when Louie and Sandra's machine would have been made. because if we go away from the bubbles real quick and just go over here, if I grab this magnet, you can see it would have been cast iron. Whoops. So Louie and Sandra's is from the later phases of production, somewhere between 1932 and 1934, when they stopped making them. All right, let's go through these pictures. I've got a couple sets I want to show you, so we'll go through them fairly rapidly. So there's the, if you didn't see it on Facebook, there's the inside of the case, or if you didn't attend the unboxing of this machine, that's the inside cover, very similar to the Featherweight. It even has that opening for the spool pin to stick through on top. So very similar designs, which leads you to believe, since these were being made technically before the Featherweight, who copied who? Yeah. So here you can see the badge mark on the inside of the case, Bridgeport, Connecticut. There's the machine inside of the case, and the foot controller was inside of there. I did a little bit of rewire work on the foot controller as well, and also sealed off some ends as well to make them safe. There you can kind of see a shot of the top and the machine balanced on top of the case. And you'll notice the case is very similar to the Featherweight case as well. Featherweight has two locking points on the outside, and then here with this Model A they added an additional locking point in the middle, so it's even more secure. And there's that beautiful Model A right there. Of course, at that point it couldn't sew worth a lick, but it looked pretty good, didn't it? Different angles of it. And that's the original belt on it right there, which was stretched out pretty bad. And the Model A only came in this color according to the books that Louie sent along with the machine. But some of the earlier Model A's, when it first came out, had a different faceplate. It wasn't stamped exactly the same way. They had different faceplates for these models, for this Model A, excuse me. Side shot of the machine. And there you can get a clearer view of that spotlight style lighting system, which with an LED bulb in it would probably do a real good job. Right now it's kind of dim. Top of the motor, again, when you look at the motor, it gives you specs on it, general specs, but it doesn't give you anything as far as amperage. It doesn't give you anything as far as amperage. And that particular motor, you can see, was made in Schenectady, New York. So we've got Connecticut involved, we've got New York involved, a number of collaborations. Kind of a rear shot of the machine. This is obviously where you plug the power source in, right down there. Clear shot of that spotlight. Also the branding on the rear of the machine, General Electric, and then also the motor as well. Another downward shot at the faceplate. I think the faceplate with the GE is even prettier than some of the scrolled ones that they made for the Model A as well, and also made for some of the other, or for some of the So Handy versions. There's that plate we looked at. There's our opening to the Long Beak shuttle that I showed you in the premiere today, how to load that and all that. There's our stitch length control. And again, on our last sew off we just did, we started down here and we went all the way to the top. There's our plug-in for the foot controller on the front of the machine. And again, as far as the weight difference between the Model A and the Featherweight, look at that base. That base is all wood. Wood is not light. Not to mention the body of this machine is also cast iron compared to aluminum. The Featherweight is made out of aluminum, so the weight difference is really a matter of the materials that were used to make this machine. There you can see the original belt on there. Also did some work on the light as well. Part of this was loose and coming out, and I did some reinforcement on there. Distance shot, Herr Obermeister, Mr. Bean, the captain. And Dr. Singer is also in the distance shot because eventually Singer had a hand in making these, so he's got an interest about that. Never can tell if the captain is happy or not, huh? Here Obermeister's checking out the fit of the belt, and he's going, yeah, not so good. Nix so good. Nix so good. Here I'm looking at some of the wiring issues with the machine. It was wrapped up with electrical tape, and all of that has been fixed as well, obviously. Here Obermeister kind of looking down at the worm gears, which were unbelievably filthy. The deep cleaning needed on this machine was, for such a tiny machine, was significantly more than most machines. Here you can see the worm gears. Not only are they filthy and kind of varnished, but they're also very dry, and that's not a good thing. Again, you got metal slapping in the metal with no buffer. There's even a clearer shot of it right there. Captain's kind of checking out the faceplate area. Mr. Bean has stepped in now and is surveying things and making out a list for all the others to work on. Because Mr. Bean is a supervisor, he's not a worker. There, I've done some initial cleaning already and getting that all cleaned up, and then it has to be lubed as well, obviously. There we're looking at, what is that, the upper tension, I think? And that upper tension had to be disassembled as well. It's filthy, filthy. You can see all the buildup on there. Power plug-in, the prongs needed to be cleaned. They had a lot of oxidation on them. And we're just really constricting how well that electricity was flowing into the machine. Here I'm checking on belt measurements, and I discover eventually, after going through all my belts back here, you can see I don't have a suitable replacement, so I had to purchase one, which still didn't fit exactly as it was supposed to. Here's just kind of a fun shot of the boys kind of looking through the glass, or plastic as it is, at the belts, offering their opinion on which one I should try next. I even tried a cog style one, but that didn't quite fit properly. And I had to, on the cog style one, because it doesn't have the flux on it, like the flexibility like the stretch one, I had to take the pulley off to try to get that one to work, but it was too tight, and it would have caused a lot of stress on the motor. So here I'm starting to take the bottom of the machine off because I'm having to get in there and service the bottom of the machine. Unlike the Featherweight and some of the other ones that have the drip pan, where there's a single nut that you can take off to remove that drip pan, here you have to take off about, I don't remember, 10 to 12 screws in order to get the bottom off. Captain is there ready to offer his opinion once we get the bottom off. So if you've never seen the bottom of a Model A, that's what it looks like. From the raceway on the left all the way to the other end. And then the motor is actually mounted to the wood plate on the bottom of the machine. And that's also on the bottom of the machine here. I talked about it earlier. These are the asbestos pads that are mounted between the wood board and the bottom of the motor. So that area you have to use extra caution on. Like I said, the Herr Obermeister has no fear of heights. He's like hanging over the edge there looking at all the stuff. And there's a different angle to look at that Long Beach shuttle area. We're looking at it from the bottom now before we were kind of looking at it from the side. More worm gears, and look at how dry they are. Also, they're filthy too. More worm gears. Dry and filthy. Look at how nasty that motor is. I don't know if you can see that in the shot or not, but that is just, see all that? And that's where initially the first reaction for a lot of novice style tinkerers would be to blow that area out, but again they would be blowing asbestos all around themselves, on themselves, and inhaling it too. So I'm glad with my experience I took it in stages and eventually, like I said, unveiled through those books that was in fact asbestos, and took a different approach to restore that motor that was safe, but equally effective. Look at how filthy that is. Those are all pivot points on the bottom of the machine that are essential for the machine to run smoothly, as you heard it and saw it do today in this premiere. And those were all varnished up, caramelized buildup, old dirt, junk, grease. It's just filthy, just absolutely filthy. God bless Herr Obermeister. He's always there. He is a hands-on guy. He has that German work ethic. You know what I mean? Plus, you can see he's studying those worm gears down there, saying, "Yeah, this is not right. This is not right. They're dirty. They're not lubricated. This is nicht richtig. This is not correct." But there again, you can see just all the junk on the bottom of that board that this motor is mounted to. Just a filthy mess. And again, the motor would not run well when it started. There's a data plate on the side of it. You can see again, General Electric, Connecticut, USA. So that motor was made in Connecticut. And I should just emphasize, let's see if it shows. Let me go back a couple real quick. I'm sorry. As you're looking at that motor, the one other fun fact that I wanted to share with you during this premiere, if I can get to it quick enough, is the difference in motor types that most sewing machine manufacturers were using. Let's see if I can find that quick enough. Okay, I think I found it. Okay, yeah, so there's basically two different types of motors that most sewing machine manufacturers would use. They would either use a commutator type motor like we're looking at here, which was a lot more common, and it involves using magnets to create that magnetic field to cause the spin of the motor. And then there also were other motor manufacturers that were trying to use is it called induction? I just want to make sure I've got the term correct. Let's see. General Electric and Singer used the universal or commutator motor in the So Handy, and the Model A universal motor is a single-phase commutated motor with wound field coils and a series of DC-type armature wound rotor powered by DC AC and using coils in the armature, rotating cylinder, and magnets. And then there was also another type. I want to find this because this is interesting. So the commutator style motor, and then I think it's called an induction motor, which was actually founded by Tesla, if I remember correctly. Let me see here. I didn't skip it. I really wanted to talk about that a little bit. I think it's really interesting. Just bear with me for a second here, folks. I think I skipped it. Hold on a second. Well, at any rate, I'll look a little bit further as we're kind of looking at this shot, but what they basically said is the commutator using magnets is a much more effective power release system than the induction, because the induction is going to use the armature without magnets to create a magnetic field through spin. And that's similar to the Tesla design. Maybe I skipped it somehow. That's similar to the Tesla design that's used in the Tesla cars. And while it's fairly effective from an electric motor standpoint, it doesn't yield the same burst and power that the machine motors do that have the magnet system in them. Let's see, 4-prong. You can imagine, folks, I'm going through a couple 100-page book here. I'm trying to find what I was wanting to share with you. Oh, you know why I'm not finding it in the book? It's because I found it through another search. That's why. Doggone it. Too much information, too much to know. Hold on a second. Let me read this to you real quick about Tesla, if I can find it quick enough. Oh, here we go, finally. So, Nikola Tesla conceived the induction motor, yeah, it is called induction motor, in 1883. It's fundamentally the same basic stator design as the permanent motor, which is the magnet motor, but without the permanent magnets. So the induction motor has no magnets. The commutator style motor does have magnets, and it's also referred to as the permanent motor, the commutator motor. Its basic operating principle is that the magnetic field, and this is what I'm reading next, is talking about the Tesla motor design that came from 1883. It basically has the same operating principle as the magnetic field generated model, but the magnetic field is generated in the stator, and it creates an opposing current in the rotor bars. And I know that's all probably a little bit confusing, but it's just a different way to generate a magnetic field to turn the motor. One is using magnets, which is the commutator. The induction motor is not using magnets. So, and that may be more than we need to cover, but I think it's interesting to know the two different motor designs. You know, one is basically using this principle on the other workbench over here by the Swedish Beauty. This one arrived, it's got a lot of motor issues going on. But as you're looking at this one, you're looking at a standard commutator type design. And just pointing at it quickly, you know, here you've got the end over here that's going to be the commutator. You've also got, this is what would be coming in contact with the motor brushes. You've got over here, you've got a combination of magnets and stacked metal limitations, along with rotor coils as well. And then you've got the armature itself over here, and a lot of the commutator ones also come with a fan for cooling the motor, like this one does here on this Swedish Beauty. And then finally the output shaft that's going to be connected to the pulley. And then these are going to be stators over here that are also helping to drive that magnetic field as well on this portion of the motor. So a lot of stuff, but I find it interesting, and I probably don't explain it as well as some could, but hopefully at least gives you a basic understanding of the difference in the motors and their function and how they generate a magnetic field, electromagnetic field. So there's that yucky motor again. The plate, talking about where it's made. Here we're kind of looking at the side of a very filthy Long Beach shuttle opening, the area that we were in today. Here I'm just starting to go in and trying to clean some impacted areas that have lint, thread, and all kinds of other things that are going to restrict. There's our Long Beach shuttle. You saw that earlier today. That's the front of it. Again, that front will be facing out as you insert it into the raceway. And the thread that was in this shuttle had to be from the 1930s. It was all yellowed, brown, kind of looked like somebody had soaked it in coffee, along with the other parts of the machine as well. Just showing you the different angles. There you can see those two screws again. Again, as you're looking at it, the screw here is going to be your set screw that holds that band in place. It has to be tightened all the way. This is your adjusting screw right here that I had to make several adjustments on to get this machine sewing as well as it did today. Plus a lot of cleaning and a lot of servicing on that piece as well. There you can see the bobbin is starting to pop out. You can see how nasty. That's not yellow thread, that's like brown thread because it's all old and disgusting. And there I'm just holding the two pieces as you saw on the premiere today. Detailed cleaning around the opening of that Long Beach shuttle area. A lot of moving parts, a lot of service areas on that, just a ton. You can see how complicated that assembly is. It truly is. A lot of things to service on there and clean. A lot of pivot points, additional cleaning. Worm gears. Again, you can't just grease or oil something, you've got to clean it, you got to strip it down, then you've got to build it back up again. You see all the junk I'm getting out of there. Also, that main shaft also was all gummed up. It was barely turning when I started. Trying to get it down to a nice shiny surface again. Nice clean surface. Combination of dental tools, brushes, anything that I needed to use to get that area cleaned out and to get it serviced properly. Then also making adjustments to the shaft alignment and making sure that the worm gears were meshing up properly, not hitting metal to metal. It's looking different, isn't it? There I'm applying my special pink grease after the areas have been cleaned properly. Again, prior to that, whoever was using the machine, however it was used, those worm gears were slapping into each other with no buffer, which was causing them to start to become damaged. There we've got the Model A leaning back and just showing you more of a distant shot. A lot of lubrication points as well for machine oil. Okay, and that's it on that one. Some more progress shots. There's the boys having fun with the manual. Okay, and I'm just showing them side by side. Again, just because of the rivalry between the two. I'm showing my Centennial Featherweight 221 next to the Model A. And we just did a real quick measurement on those two machines along with the 99K. So now you have a better understanding from a standpoint of size and harp space how they differ. There I've taken out the upper tension, which was just a mess, and we're starting to concentrate on that as well. Boys are coming together with an idea or a plan. Obviously, again, Mr. Bean is the supervisor. Harold Burmeister already has the dental tool. The captain's kind of in the back. And around that end where where you would wind a bobbin, right there on that little stem, there was a ton of thread wrapped around the inside, constricting the movement of that. And when the machine is running, this is always turning. So whoever was running it before was putting a huge amount of strain on that motor that was already filthy and gunked up and barely running by this additional drag being created by all the thread compacted around there. General cleanup again. We've already done the deep cleaning on the motor, the underside of it. Now we're starting to concentrate on aesthetics and just general cleanliness of the machine, including the light assembly. That's an area that oftentimes is neglected by people, and it can't be. It's got to be addressed. You can look at that presser foot and it gives you an idea of the general condition of the machine when I started to really dig into it. Very filthy machine. There's what I think, again, is a spectacular faceplate. We're all used to the scroll plates and all that, but this is just a simple embossed, stamped plate highlighting the manufacturer of General Electric. More cleaning. That's on the inside where the bolt would attach to the machine for the faceplate. You can see the varnishing and junk in there. It needs to be cleaned out as well. My process is very deep, folks. It's more detailed than anyone I've ever met. And it really does, it's all essential, and it really does make a huge difference in the final product of the machine. Faceplate area, cleaning, removing varnishing, little bit of rust, but not much on this machine, especially not compared to the one that we looked at recently with Lorraine. But look at all the filth that I'm getting off of there on that Q-tip swab. Just gives you an idea of even a surface that can look semi-clean can just be filthy. More cleaning. Starting to make a dent in it. Starting to really, really look like it's supposed to, which also directly affects performance as well. More cleaning. And that's where the upper tension would seat in there. And there's also surfaces here as well that have to be cleaned also into this well as well, where that assembly is going to extend into there to meet up with the presser foot assembly. More cleaning. More cleaning. Some of that stuff will not come off with solvents and with swabs, so you have to chip away at it just like plaque. You think any of this would be done at a standard sewing machine type service center? Type in what you think in the chat. Like I've said, I've issued the challenge over the years of someone to tell me about a service center that goes to the depth that I do on machines. I've never ever gotten a response. Just crickets. There's our threading guide right there coming off the top. Varnishing on that. Just cleaning everything. You know what? Everything needs to be cleaned. It just does. Look at the filth on here. Part of the take-up arm. This gives you an idea of the condition of what the machine was in prior to taking it through this phase of the deep cleaning. Starting to focus near the top of the machine again now, near the worm gears and the main shaft that feeds back out to the bobbin winder. Also look at the inside of that lid. That's all old caramelized oil and grease built up on there. Went through there with the dental tools and that, cleaned up all the worm gears, and now it's got that fresh grease on there. So those worm gears, when this machine spins up and was doing heavy duty sewing in that, those worm gears are just kissing each other gently instead of slamming into each other. More servicing. These are going to be out of order, obviously. Here's after the worm gears were cleaned, and then like I said, they're out of sequence, so you'll see them here where they've been cleaned, and then we already saw them when they've been greased. So the main shaft off the worm gears, you can see, also needs attention, or needed attention, prior to me cleaning it all up. There's the pulley that comes off of the motor. That also needs to be serviced and adjusted too. Busy workbench. Busy workbench. Doing the final phases of getting the undercarriage of the machine proper. Starting to target the motor now very carefully. Again, knowing now that it has asbestos elements in it, you've got to handle it very carefully. But it doesn't mean that you don't go in there and dig around the motor and clean it out properly as well, so that it runs at the top of its game. Lubrication, and that's the end of that phase. We'll go on to our final phase, and this is one I just recently posted. We're right near the finish line, and I'm finalizing some things on the machine, including the upper tension. It's great to get to this point after such a long road, you know. There's our upper tension, which I can't even tell you how bad off it was, but you'll be able to see, I think, in the shots. That is not the way it's supposed to look, including that spring back here that has so much buildup it was barely functioning. These are very different tension discs here, the way they're shaped and the way they're formed for this Model A. But there was so much cleaning, deep cleaning and servicing, and then lubrication that was essential for this, so that it functioned as well as you witnessed it today in the premiere. And just look at that take-up spring. That is just absolutely beyond disgusting. It's just horrible. And again, I get so irritated when I just recently posted on Facebook misinformation and contradictory information about servicing a machine, etc., oiling it. And I can't tell you how many people have embraced the lie that all you have to do is swab between using some sort of a fabric or something like that, and that's sufficient to get the upper tension cleaned. There's no way. And you're never going to get it to this state of function and cleanliness following a myth like that, misinformation like that. Now here you're seeing a contrast. This one has been prepared properly, so it's going to function perfectly. This one still needs to be addressed, along with the set. That's a set screw that holds the whole assembly in place, that has a combination of varnishing and rust on it. More cleaning. You see some of the parts are already starting to get their luster and their shine back. And luster and shine for a sewing machine means function and ease of function as well. Not just a matter of doing its job, but being able to do it with ease. Doesn't that look different? Still dirty, still dirty. Starting to get into it now. Starting to get into it. Now I'm using a solvent that helps to break some of that stuff down. Some of the stuff you just can't even get off with a dental tool, if you can imagine. Now I'm starting to go through the process of reassembling it piece by piece by piece. And again, as you're putting it together, there's certain parts that have to stay dry. There's other parts that it's essential that they be lubricated. It's knowing the difference that makes the big difference. Also, this upper tension on this Model A with this take-up spring is kind of a pain in the neck, but you have to get it adjusted just right so that it functions properly. Otherwise, you're going to be getting broken thread, you're going to be getting misaligned stitches, and you're going to be getting feed factors when you're trying to sew. More adjustments there, using a dental tool to try to get that aligned properly. Upper tension is put back together. It's been serviced properly, it's been cleaned properly, and now I've done, for the first time with the machine, and I showed that to you in the premiere today, I'm doing my first stitch rows. I sometimes will do a little bit of stitching with the machine, but when the machine is an unknown commodity, whether it has electrical issues or potential mechanical issues, or like this one where all of the worm gears were slamming into each other and damaging themselves, I will sometimes not do any sewing until I've taken the machine through my entire process. And then I'll start to concentrate on fine-tuning it. And that's what I did with this Model A. There we're starting to lay down some stitches that are, I wouldn't say they're page 34, but they're getting there. Now we're getting closer to page 34. Look at that upper tension compared to what it looked like before. Oh. So obviously, being the century of innovation, cars were a major focus point at the World's Fair in Chicago back in 1934. Anything mechanical, to include the sewing machine, obviously. Look at them beat that sucker up there. Showing the ruggedness of them, off-roading. Oh my They used to do that with the Model Ts too, way back in the day. And those things were, I mean, they were like trucks. They were like ATVs. They would just baja with those suckers. More so than Model A's. Model A's, they pampered them a little bit more. Model T's, man, oh man, kind of like this. Oh my gosh, there goes a headlight. Ouch, ouch. Oh my gosh. There goes your warranty. Holy cow. Oh my gosh, there he goes. Yeah, that's not supposed to be running out of there. Oops. Oops. Well, geez, if you turn it over, it's not going to have any radiator fluid. It's not air cooled. Ouch. That guy better get another job, huh? Do not drive that car. You're going to blow the motor. Do not. Oh my gosh, you're going to do it? Oh boy. You guys need to go back to maintenance 101. Seriously. You don't drive a car when all the fluid runs out of it. Can you imagine having actually been there back in 1934, witnessing this? I mean, we're witnessing it now, but... There we go. The end. The end. All right. Well, Louie and Sandra, thank you for the opportunity of having this fabulous, somewhere between 1932 and 34, General Electric Model A. She has shown her stuff, hasn't she? Look again at that pile up over there. Yeah. Amazing job. So stay tuned for other premieres like this, where we take a machine that is just in horrible shape. And this poor machine, if it had a voice and could speak right now, it would be saying, hallelujah! Waited almost 10 years to have this very special spa day at the workshop in Oconto, Wisconsin. It's finally happened. I'm ready now to head back to California, where it's a lot warmer than here, and show my stuff to my friends in California, Sandra and Louie, and certainly anyone else that wants to witness what this machine is able to do now. It really gives you an appreciation for how fabulous this machine was back in 1932-33 when it came on the scene. This particular one came on the scene, and you know, just how fabulous it is today. You saw it yourself. So I'll leave you with another great quote, and that is, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, it's a habit." And I continue to try to improve my habits of my craftsmanship and work on vintage machines every single day, so that I can continue to pursue that goal of even raising that bar higher on what excellence looks like when it's done right. All right, God bless, take care. Thank you, an A to all of you today for being in this class today. It was a long class, but I think we covered some really, really, really good stuff. Don't you? Take care.